Chapter 13. Chubbs and Zoo were not happy to be woken up at 5:30 a.m., even less enthusiastic about Liam's forcing them to make the bed while we freshened up the bathroom and replaced the towels. Not exactly clean of us, but it was much better than alerting management they had hosted a bunch of squatters for the night. Chubbs took one look at me as he marched out to the minivan and stopped dead in his tracks. He wore his thought plain as day, his face, "You're still here?" I shrugged. "Deal with it." He shook his head and let out another one of those sighs. Once we were settled, Zoo and Chubbs in the middle seat, we all watched as Liam closed the hotel room door, cup of crappy hotel coffee in hand. That's right, I thought, glancing at Zoo out of the corner of my eye. She had curled up in her seat and was using her gloved hand as a pillow. Didn't get much sleep, did he? Liam ran through his usual routine of checking the mirror positions, adjusting the recline of the seat, buckling himself in, and turning the keys in the ignition. But Liam's next order of business upon returning to the minivan wasn't to answer any of the number of questions Chubbs threw his way about where we were going. He waited until his friend was good and snoring before he called back to me. "Can you read a map?" The embarrassment and shame washed through my painted my face red. "No, sorry." "Wasn't that something your dad was supposed to teach you eventually?" "No problem." Liam patted the empty passenger seat. "I'll teach you later, but for now I just need someone to watch the signs for me. Come on up," to the co-pilot chair. I jerked a thumb in the direction of Chubbs. Liam shook his head. "Are you kidding me? Yesterday he thought a mailbox was a clown." I unbuckled my seatbelt with a sigh as I climbed over Chubbs's outstretched legs to the front. I glanced over my shoulder, my eyes going to his two small glasses. "Is his eyesight really that bad?" "Worse," Liam said. "So, right after we got the hell out of Caledonia, we broke into this house to spend the night, right? I woke up in the middle of the night hearing the most awful noise, like a cow dying or something. I followed the wailing, clutching some kid's baseball bat, thinking I was going to have to beat someone's head in for having to make us clean getaway. Then I saw what was sitting at the bottom of the drained pool." "No way," I said. "Way," he confirmed. Hawkeye had gone out to relieve himself and somehow missed the giant gaping hole in the ground, twisted his ankle, and couldn't climb out of the deep end. I tried so hard not to laugh, but it was impossible. The mental image was just too damn good. Liam reached over and switched on the radio, letting me choose the station. He seemed satisfied with my decision to stay with The Who. With the window down all the way, I leaned out, resting my chin on my hands. The morning air was warm, licked by the first rays of sunlight. When I looked up past the very tip-top of the wild trees, there was nothing but blue sky. The small sound, a ghost of a sigh, was released behind us. Both Liam and I turned to Zoo's sleeping face. "Did we wake you up last night?" he asked. "I caught a little of it," I said. "Does she have a lot of nightmares?" "In the few weeks I've known her, it's been an every other night thing. Sometimes she dreams about Caledonia, and I can't talk her down, but I never know what to say about her family. I swear, if I ever meet her parents, I'm going to." His voice trailed off, but the anger coating them had given the air a palpable charge. "What did they do to her?" "Gave her away, because they were afraid of her," he said. "Like me and Chubbs, our folks tried to keep us hidden, and that's why we went to Camp Lake. Zoo's parents actually sent her away when she short-circuited her dad's car in the middle of a freeway." "Oh, God." "They sent her during the first official collection." He propped an elbow along the door panel and leaned his face against his hand. His Redskins cap hid his eyes from view. "I forget you missed this." I waited for him to explain. "It was after most people our age had already been taken or were in hiding. The government issued a notice that any parents who didn't feel safe or capable of taking care of their kiddos could send them to school on a specific morning, and the PSI Special Forces would be there to collect them for rehabilitation. Kept it all very hush-hush to avoid upsetting children or inciting them to misbehave." I rubbed my forehead, trying to force out the images filtering through my mind. "Did she actually tell you this?" "Tell me. Tell me, you mean?" He kept his eyes straight ahead, but I saw his hands choke the wheel. "No, she wrote it out in bits and pieces. I haven't heard her say a single word since." "Since the breakout?" I finished. I felt relieved in spite of everything I knew. "It's a choice, then, not something they did to her." "No, it has everything to do with what they did. It's not a choice," Liam said. "I think maybe the most frustrating feeling in the world is having something to say but not knowing how to put it into words. To have lived through something but not be able to get it out before it festers. I mean, you're right, she can talk, and maybe one day she will. After everything I've put her through, after what happened, I just don't know. It was the most frustrating feeling in the world, second only to the inherent helplessness that came with being trapped in a camp. All of your decisions made for you. After what had happened with Sam, I didn't say a word for almost a full year. There was just no way to vocalize that kind of pain. The radio jumped as we lost the station's signal, switching through a Spanish language channel, then one with classical music, before finally settling on the dry, nasally voice of a man reading news. To inform you that initial reports indicate that 4 separate explosions were set off this morning in Manhattan's subway. Liam's fingers switched on the switch, shot out to the switchboard channel, but I changed it right back. Though confirmation has been slow to come out of the city, we believe these explosions were not nuclear or biological in nature, and were concentrated around Midtown, where President Gray was rumored to be hiding in the most recent attempt of his life. League, West Coast, or fake? Chubb's sleepy voice floated up behind us. Our sources indicate that President Gray and his cabinet believe this to be the work of the Federal Coalition. Federal Coalition, I repeated. West Coast, the boys answered together. Chubbs elaborated. Based out of Los Angeles, they're a section of the government that survived the DC bombings and weren't crazy about the idea of Gray disregarding the whole 2-term limit they had set up. They're mostly talking heads since the military sided with Gray, obviously. Which is why Gray is in New York and not Washington, I asked. They're still rebuilding the Capitol and the White House, only it's not going so well, you know. They defaulted on all their debt, Liam said. He spread the government out between Virginia and New York for its protection, to make sure none of the fugitive PSI groups of the League got any ideas about wiping it out once and for all. So, the Federal Coalition, they're against the camps? The reform program? Chubb sighed a little. Hate to break it to you, Green, but something you'll learn pretty fast is that we're not exactly a priority to anyone right now. Especially, everyone's more focused on the fact that the country is broke as a joke. Who do we like then? I pressed. We like us, Liam said after a while, and that's about it. There were apparently only 2 restaurant chains left in the state of Virginia, or at least the western half of it. Cracker Barrel and Waffle House, and one wasn't open before 9 o'clock in the morning. Thank goodness, Liam said in a solemn voice as he parked a short distance away from the Waffle House. I don't know how we would have had to choose between these 2 fine culinary establishments. He had nominated himself to order whatever food he could afford with $20, but refused when I asked if he wanted me to go with him. Zoo held up a small notebook, waving it to get his attention as he stepped outside. Done already? She nodded. Why don't you have Chubbs check your answers? No, don't make that face. He's better at math than I am, anyway. You're damn right I am, Chubbs said, without looking from his book. Zoo flipped the flimsy notebook open to a blank page and scribbled something down, which held it up for him to see. Liam grinned. Whoa, whoa. Long division? I think you're getting ahead of yourself, man. You still haven't conquered your double-digit multiplying. I watched him hop out of the minivan, a flare of annoyance shooting up from my core. All of this would have been so much easier if he wasn't the only one of us who looked old enough to pass for 20. At least I'd feel a lot better knowing one of us could be out there watching his back. Liam must have felt my gaze burning through the back of his jacket, because he stopped and turned to wave before disappearing around the corner. You really have to stop encouraging him, Chubbs was saying to Zoo. I glanced back, watching as he used the blunt end of her pencil to follow the lines of numbers on the page. He needs to accept reality at some point. Zoo's face scrunched up, twisting like a piece of hard lemon candy was stuck to her tongue. She punched him in the shoulder. I'm sorry, he said, but clearly wasn't. It's just a waste of time and energy to teach you this stuff when you're never going to get the chance to use it. You don't know that, I said, flashing Zoo a reassuring smile. I added, you'll be ahead of everyone your age by the time things go back to normal. When I started believing in normal anyway. Everything I had thought up to this point could only be used to support Chubb's argument. He was right, even if I didn't want to admit it. You know what you'll be doing if things were normal, Chubb said? I'd be picking which college I would attend later this fall. I'd have taken my SATs, gone to football games and prom, taken chemistry. His voice trailed off, but I picked up the frayed end all the same. How could I not? These were the exact same things I thought about when I let myself get to that dark place of should be and could have been. My mom had once said that education was a privilege not afforded to everyone. But she was wrong. It wasn't a privilege. It was our right. We had the right to a future. Zoo sensed the shift of mood. She looked between us, lips moving silently. We needed to change the subject. Poof, I said, crossing my arms over my chest and leaning back against the seat, like you would have ever gone to a football game. Hey, I resent that. Chubbs handed Zoo her notebook. Here, you need to work on your nines. And when he turned back to me, it was with a disapproving look. I can't believe you, of all people, fell for his cotton candy dreams. What's that supposed to mean? You were in Thurmond for what, 5 years? 6, I corrected. And you're missing the point. It's not that I believe in what Lee's saying. It's that I hope he's right. I really, really hope he's right. Because what's the alternative? We're stuck out in hiding until their generation dies off. We flee to Canada. Good luck with that, Chubb said. Both Canada and Mexico have built up walls to keep us out and them in. Because they thought Ian was a contagious disease? No, because they've hated us all along and were only looking out for the right excuse to keep our fat asses and fanny packs out of their countries forever. Liam chose that exact moment to reappear. 4 styrofoam containers balanced between his hands. He was moving fast, almost at a run. I leaned over and popped the door open for him, and he all but dumped the containers on my lap. Oh God, what now? Chubbs cried. Whoa, I began, trying to keep the hot food from spilling over my legs and the seat. Betty's engine started with a snarl, and suddenly we were rocketing backward. With the sheep blocking the back window, Liam had to rely on only using the side mirrors to navigate down the road and up the small back alley that divided the Waffle House from an abandoned jewelry consignment store. I braced an elbow against the door as he steered the old minivan past the dumpsters to the cramped employee parking lot, tucked away in the dead end around the corner. The minivan lurched to a stop, throwing all 4 of us forward. We're going to stay here for a little while, he announced to our terrified faces. Don't panic, but I think it'll just be safer here for a bit. You saw her. It wasn't a question. Chubbs already knew the answer before he asked. Lady Jane. Liam rubbed the back of his neck as he leaned forward. He had left the nose of the minivan out far enough so we could peer around the Waffle House to see the alley. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. How is it possible she caught up with us? Holy hell, Chubb squawked. Pretty sure or definitely sure? After a moment, Liam answered, definitely sure. She's got a new set of wheels, a white truck, but I'd recognize that smug face anywhere. Did she see you? I don't know, he said. Probably not. Otherwise, she and whoever her new boy toy is would have tried to run me down. They drove by just as I was leaving. I craned my neck forward to see far enough past the wall of the restaurant to the alley opening. As if on cue, a glinting white truck rolled by. 2 dark figures in the front seats. Liam and I flew back against our seats at the exact same moment, looking at each other in alarm. I don't think either of us took a breath until we were sure no one was coming down the alley to investigate. He cleared his throat. How about you pass out the food? I'll just check. Liam Michael Stort, Chubb's voices thundered from the back seat. If you step 1 foot out of this minivan, I will order Green to run you down with it. I don't think I won't, I warned, knowing exactly what Liam wanted to do. Go out and risk his neck by walking down the alley to make sure the coast was clear. When I handed him a styrofoam container, he slumped back in his seat, accepting defeat. Liam had ordered each of us a simple meal of scrambled eggs, bacon, and 2 pancakes without syrup. The others dug in with gusto, inhaling the meal in 5 bites. I gave my pancakes to Zoo before Liam had the chance to. After some semblance of calm had settled back over us, he pulled up his map and spread it out over the wheel. The dashboard clock beside him said 7:25 a.m., and when he turned to face us, it was an expression of determination I had never seen someone wear so early in the morning. Okay, team, he began. We need to get back on track. I know our last East River was a total bust, but we have to keep looking. So let's review the facts those blues gave us. EDDO. It was after a full minute of silence that I realized the extent of the facts. We should have tried to bribe them for more information, Chubb said. With what? Liam said, setting down the map. They wouldn't take you, Chubbs, and you're a most precious commodity. Chubbs, unsurprisingly, did not find that funny. Did they spell Edo out for you guys? Or was it 1D or 2? I asked because if it's an actual clue, that could make a difference. Well, crap, Liam said finally. I felt a sharp tug on my arm, turned towards Zoo, who held up a notebook for us to see. She had written out the letters E-D-O. Nice job, Zoo, Liam said. Good thing one of us was listening. And that was it, I said. The only other thing they coughed up was that if we hit Raleigh, we'd gone too far south. And we had to beg for even that. Liam confessed. It was really pathetic. They could have been pulling our legs, too, like Chubb said. That's what irritates me most. If the East River is so great, then why were they leaving? They were going home, remember? The slip kid? While they were arguing, I slipped the map out from under Liam's hands and squinted at it, trying to make sense of the lines. He had given me a very vague rundown of how to route a path from point A to point B, but it was still overwhelming. What are you guys thinking? I asked. What theory were you working with? We ran across Kitts right around the Ohio state line, Liam said. They were coming from the east, headed west. If you add that to the other bit about DC and Raleigh, the likely candidates become West Virginia, Virginia, or Maryland. Zoo said EDO is another name for Tokyo, but it seems a little far-fetched he'd be there. And I think it's a code, Chubb said, a cipher of some kind. He sat up a little straighter, turning to face me fully. The way his smile spread over his face made me think of a nature documentary we watched in school once, about the way crocodiles flash their teeth as they skim through the water towards their prey. Speaking of codes, didn't you say the League broke you out because you were world-class code breaker? Crap. I didn't say world-class. Oh yeah, Liam's face lit with the most heartbreaking expression of excitement. Can you take a stab at it? Double crap. I, er, I guess, I said, careful to keep my face neutral. Zoo, can I see the notebook again? They were all staring at me. They might as well have been sitting on my chest for how paralyzing it was. It was near freezing in the van without the heat on, but my body felt heavy with hot, sticky panic. I was holding onto that notebook like it was a prayer from heaven. I knew there were kids out there who could plug in a few dozen letters in their brain and spew out complex coordinates or immediately spot a riddle in a puzzle. But I definitely was not one of them. Chubb snorted. Looks like the League picked a lemon. Hey, Liam said, his toe sharp. We've been mulling over the damn thing for 2 weeks and haven't figured out exactly nothing. You can't give her an hour to think about it? Could I sub out the letters EDO for numbers? 5415? God, what other kinds of codes were there? A railroad code? No, that wasn't right. Or was it not a code? That would make a hell of a lot more sense, actually. The riddle had been something that kids both in and out of camps could figure out, and it couldn't be too difficult, otherwise no one would get it. Lie, I thought, reaching up to smooth a stray piece of hair back from my face. Just lie. Just do it. Just say something. What did three-digit numbers usually represent? A price, a time, an area code. Oh, if I was right, oh God was more like it. Oh? Oh what? I'd forgotten well. I could be remembering it wrong. And don't get too excited, but I think it's a Virginia area code. There's no area code that's 4 digits, Chubb said. 51415 doesn't work. But 540 does, I said. People sub out O for 0 when they talk sometimes, right? Liam scratched the back of his head and looked over at at Chubbs. 45. Does that sound familiar to you? I turned towards Chubbs, suddenly seeing him in a new light. You're from Virginia? I crossed my arms and looked out his window. I'm from Northern Virginia. Well, that figured. 45 is Western Virginia, I explained. I'm not sure how far north and south it extends, but it could be right around the area, I think. I showed him the map. I just didn't think I knew. 540 had been my area code when I lived with my parents in Salem. They are the numbers of the cities and the towns, but there's a lot of underdeveloped land. Not a bad place to hide out. Is that a fact? Liam kept his eyes on this road and his voice even, but there was something a little too casual about it. Did you grow up near there? I looked down at my notebook in my hands again, feeling something clench in my chest. No, I didn't. Virginia Beach, then? I shook my head. Not any place you've been or heard of. I heard Chubbs's tongue cluck as he opened his mouth to say something, but there was a sharp cough from the driver's seat. The topic had been dropped, and no one was willing to try to pick it up again, least of all me. Well, it's at least as good a lead as any, and I wish the area was a little bit smaller, he glanced my way. Thanks, Ruby Tuesday. A not unpleasant warmth rushed to my center. Don't mention it, and if I'm wrong, I let it trail off. It was a good lead. With one last glance down the alley to make sure it was clear, Liam refolded the map and tossed it back into the open glove box. Betty came back to life with a growl. Where are we going? Chubbs asked. It's a place I know. Liam gave a one-shoulder shrug. Someplace I stayed before. The drive shouldn't take us that long, maybe 2 hours. If I get lost, though, one of you Virginians is going to have to step up to the plate and help me out. It had been a very long time since someone had labeled me like that, as a person with a home. It was true, I had been born here, but Thurman had been my home for nearly as long as it hadn't. Gray walls and concrete floors had bleached out almost every memory of my parents' house, stripping away first the small details, the smell of my mom's honey-soaked biscuits, the order of the pictures lining the staircase wall, before going to devour the bigger ones too. I used to wonder at night, when it was quiet enough in the cabin, when I let myself get to the point of wishing for home, if home in my heart was supposed to be the place where I'd been born, or if it was the place that was raising me. If I got to choose it, or if it had somehow already claimed me. The truth was, when I looked at my reflection in the window, I couldn't see any bit of Ruby that had lived in a little house at the end of the lane, honey sticking to her fingers and hair falling from her braids, and it made me feel empty in a way, like I had forgotten the words to my favorite song. That place, that girl was gone forever, and all that was left was a product of the place that had taught her to fear the bright things inside her heart. We passed the exit after exit to Harrisburg, and then turnoffs from James Madison University. Driving down the major highways with nothing more than a prayer that no one would pull us over wasn't exactly my idea of a good time, but for now the risk seemed worth it, at least for the view. I love Shenandoah Valley, every inch of its gorgeous spread. When I was little, my parents used to pull me out of school early for a long weekend of hiking or camping. I never brought books or video games for the drive. I didn't need them. I would just stare at the window and drink it all in. You know, in movies, the ones set in older times, when the shot freezes on the hero or the heroine gazing out over the forest or river, and the sun catches the leaves at just the right slant and the music begins to swell? That's exactly how I felt as we entered Shenandoah Valley. It didn't hit me until that moment, until the first glimpse of gauzy blue mist surrounding the mountains, that we really were in Western Virginia. If we had stayed on the highway, we'd be 2 hours away from my parents in Salem. 2 hours. I didn't know how to feel about that. Ugh, Liam groaned, pointing toward the temporary road sign up ahead. 81 closed between Harrisburg and Stanton. Use local roads. By 9 o'clock in the morning, we were finally deep enough into Harrisburg to find a pulse of life. Here and there, we saw restaurants opening their doors in the morning light. We passed for a few older adults pedaling away on their bikes, balancing precariously on 2 wheels with their briefcases or bags, their heads bent toward the sidewalk. They didn't even look up as we passed. No JMU students, though, none that I could spot. Chubb sighed at the sight of them, leaning his forehead against the window. You okay, buddy? Need to stop and smell the scholatism? What's the point? Chubb shook his head. It's closed like all the others. I whirled around in my seat. Why? Lack of students, mostly. If you're old enough to go to college, you're old enough to be drafted. Even if it wasn't the case, I doubt people can really afford it anymore. Jealous, that's depressing, I said. The offer still stands, Liam told his friend. You know, I'm happy to break into a classroom for you if you need to sit in one of those cramped seats while you stare at a whiteboard for a while. I know how much you like the smell of dry erase markers. I appreciate that, Chubb said, folding his hands in his lap, but that's not necessary. We passed what I thought must have been a black wrought iron fence, but it was almost impossible to see, trapped as it was between what looked like a raggedy patchwork blanket. It wasn't until we got closer that I realized we were actually looking at hundreds, maybe thousands of sheets of paper that had been tied and taped onto the fence or stuck between the thin bars. Liam slowed the car tilting his sunglasses down to squint at them. What do they say? Chubbs asked. I can't. Zoo only put her head back down and shut her eyes. They were missing posters with the faces of little kids and teenagers, photographs, signs whose wording had all been smeared away by rain, the biggest of these being a banner that said nothing more than Matthew 19:14, hung crookedly, almost like someone had tried to rip it down, only to have someone else come along half-heartedly string it back up. The wall of faded paper took a beating as the wind blew through the fences, ripping some of the more decrepit sheets free and making others flutter like hummingbird wings. And where there was a room, we saw stuffed animals and flowers and blankets and ribbons. No, not missing, I thought. Those kids had been taken, or really were gone forever. Their parents and families were searching for them, posting their pictures because they wanted them back, needed them. God, Liam's voice sounded strained. Where did they say they could pick up the 81 back again? The ash trees lining the lone one-lane back road were just coming into their lovely young skin, but in the afternoon light their shadow couldn't have been longer. Chapter 14. I slipped off into sleep somewhere between Staunton and Lexington and woke up just in time to get the perfect view of the towering white warehouse that was Roanoke, Virginia's former Walmart. Sure, the blue sign was still clinging desperately to the side of the building. That was about the only recognizable thing about the supercenter. A number of stray carts wandered across the parking lot aimlessly, carried this and that way depending on the moody gust of wind. With the exception of a few abandoned cars and green dumpsters, the enormous blacktop parking lot was empty. Against the tangerine blush of the afternoon sunlight, it looked like the apocalypse had already touched down in Virginia. And we were only a stone's throw away from Salem, a 10-minute drive. My stomach clenched at the thought. Once again, Liam insisted on going in alone to check it out. I felt Zoo's rubber glove on my arm and didn't need to look at her face to know what kind of expression I would find there. She didn't want him charging into what looked like an honest-to-God hellhole alone any more than I did. This is why you stayed, I reminded myself, to take care of them. And in that moment, the person that needed me most was the one walking away. I jumped out of Betty, my hands gripping the door handle. Honk the horn 3 times for trouble, I said, and slid the door shut. Liam must have heard because he waited for me, leaning against one of the rusted shopping cart stalls. Any way I could convince you to go back to Betty? Nope, I said. Come on. He fell right in step beside me, fists dug deep in his pockets. I couldn't see his eyes, but the way he was slouching toward the demolished doors was telling enough. You asked me before how I knew about this place, he said, when we were nearly at the entrance. No, it's okay. I know. None of my business. Green, Liam said. It's okay. I just don't know where to begin, you know? Chubbs and I were both in hiding. Well, it wasn't exactly pleasant for either of us. He at least got to stay at his grandparents' cabin in Pennsylvania. Ah, but you had the pleasure of holing up in this fine establishment, among other places, Liam had said. I don't like to talk about that time in front of Zoo. I don't want her to think that that's what life is going to be. But you can't lie to her, I said. I know you don't want to scare her, but you can't pretend that her life isn't going to be hard. It's not fair. Not fair, he sucked in a sharp breath, closing his eyes. When he spoke, his voice returned to his usual soft tones. Never mind. Forget it. Hey, I said, taking his arm. I get it, okay? I'm on your side, but don't act like it's going to be easy. Don't do that to her. Don't set her up to be crushed. I was in camp with thousands of kids who grew up thinking mommy and daddy were going to be there for them. And we, are all coming out of this seriously damaged. Whoa, Liam said, all traces of anger gone. You are not damaged. That, I could have protested until I was blue in the face. Whoever had unhooked Walmart's glass sliding doors from their tracks hadn't done a good job of finding a safe place to store them. Shards of glass coated the cement floor, blown out dozens of feet from the black metal frames. We stepped over and through their mangled shapes entered the small, strange space where Greeter would have been. Next to me, Liam's foot slipped against the sallow dust collected on the floor. I shot an arm out to brace him as he grunted in surprise. Even as I helped him right himself, his eyes remained fixed on the ground, where dozens of footprints fanned out in the dust. Every shape and size, from the jagged pattern of the sole of a man's hiking boot to the decorative swirly curls left behind by a young child's tennis shoe, all stamped out there like cookie cut from a fresh spread of dough. They could be old, I whispered. Liam nodded but didn't pull away from my side. I hadn't fooled either of us. The store's power had been shut off some time ago, and it was clear to see it had been open for the wild for too long. There was only a second between when we first heard the rattling of the nearby shelves and when Liam jumped in front of me. It's, I began, but he silenced me with a shake of his head. We watched the shelves, waiting. And when the deer, a gorgeous sweet thing with a silky caramel coat and big black eyes, came prancing out from behind the overturned magazine racks, Liam and I looked at each other, dissolving into shaky laughter. Liam pressed his finger to his lips and waved me forward, his eyes scanning the dark fleet of identical cash registers in front of us. Someone had taken the carts from the store and tried stuffing them into the lanes, as if to create a kind of fortified wall against any unwanted visitors. Carefully, without disturbing the pile-up of baskets, we climbed up and over the nearest register's conveyor belt. Standing on top of it, I could see more shelves that had been lined up in front of the other exit. It looked as though something huge had come slamming through it at one point in time, bursting through the makeshift barricade. What did that? I think there's some part of everyone, PSI or not, that tuned into the memories of a place. Strong feelings, especially terror and desperation, leave an imprint on the air that echo back to whoever's unlucky enough to walk through that place again. I felt like darkness was stroking beneath my chin with a beckoning finger whispering to me to lean forward and know its secrets. Something terrible happened here, I thought, feeling a cold drip down my spine. The wind whistled through the broken doors, playing us the kind of screeching song that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I wanted to leave. This place was not safe. I was not going to bring Zoo or Chubbs, so why was Liam still going forward? Overhead, the emergency lights flickered on and off, buzzing like a box of trapped flies. Everything beneath them was cast in a sickly green light as he moved farther and farther down the first aisle. It seemed like the darkness waiting at the end would swallow him whole. I sprang forward into the sea of empty metal shelves, half of which were knocked flat on their backs or leaning against others in slanted lines, their shelves buckling under some invisible weight. My sneakers squeaked as I wove through the sea of lotions, mouthwash, and nail polish on the floor. Things that seemed so necessary in the past, so vital to life, wasted and forgotten. When I came up to him again, my fingers closed around the soft loose leather of his jacket sleeve. At the slightest tug, Liam turned. His blue eyes lit up in surprise. I took a step back and pulled my hand back to my side, shocked at myself. It had felt natural to do. I hadn't been thinking at all. Only a feeling, very sharp, real need to be close to him. I think we should leave, I whispered. Something about this place doesn't feel right, and it had nothing to do with the strange crying of the wind or the bird high in the old store's rafters. We're okay, he said, his back to me, but he slipped his hand from his pocket. It drifted back towards me, floating up through the darkness. I didn't know whether he meant to motion me or to move forward, or for me to take it, but I couldn't bring myself to do either. We walked side by side toward the back right corner of the store. It seemed that this section of the store, with all of its hardware and light bulbs, had been left somewhat alone, or at least hadn't been as useful to the people who had picked the other shelves to the bone. I saw where we were headed immediately. Someone had set up their own little camp, using a bright pool raft as a mattress. A few empty boxes of graham crackers and Hostess cupcakes were piled on top of a cooler, and on the top of that was a small wireless radio and lantern flashlight. Wow, I can't believe this is still here. Liam stood a foot behind me, his arms crossed over his chest. I followed his gaze down to the dozens of indentions in the cracked white tile. They were almost enough to distract me from the patchworks of old bloodstains on the ground beneath his feet. My lips parted. It's old, Liam said quickly, like that would make me feel any better. Liam reached towards me, forcing a smile. I blew out a breath I had been holding and reached out to take his hand. At almost the exact moment our hands touched, I saw it. The emergency light above that section of the back wall snapped back to full glare like a spotlight, illuminating the black sign painted there, along with a very clear message: "Get out now." The thick, uneven letters looked like they were weeping. The light cracked, and then they went out with a loud pop. But I threw myself forward, out of Liam's grip, straight for the spray-painted message, because that smell, the way the words drooped. I pressed my fingers against the PSI symbol, that they came away sticky. Black. Fresh paint. Liam had only just reached me when I felt the strangest sensation of burning, right at my core. I looked down, expecting to see a spark igniting in the front of Zoo's ridiculous dress. But then I was falling, and Liam was on top of me, bulldozed right over as if we had been doing nothing more than two daisies poking up through the cracks in the tile. Liam's shoulder rammed into my chest, knocking the air out of our lungs. I tried to lift my head to see exactly what had happened, but there was this weight, this solid, invisible slab of stone keeping me on my back, and Liam flat against me. The floor was freezing on my back, but my entire focus was on the solid press of his shoulder against my cheek. Our hands were caught between us, and for a moment I had an uneasy sensation of not knowing where one of us began and the other ended. He swallowed hard, the pulse in his throat close enough for me to hear it. Liam moved his head to the side, straining his muscles that lined the strong column of his spine. "Hey," he shouted, "who's there?" The only response was another shove from the invisible hands. Suddenly we were shooting across the ground, Liam's leather jacket squealing against the dusty floor as we slid. I watched the emergency lights beyond Liam's head pass with dizzying speed, tracking together like a single beam. Riotous laughter followed us down the aisles, seeming to come from below us, above us, on either side. I thought I saw a dark shape move out of the corner of my eye, but it looked more like a monster than a person. We tore through ribbons and ripped shower curtains, the body lotion, the bleach, to the line of cash registers at the front of the store. "Cut it out," Liam yelled. There were some loud sounds you hear once and never forget. A bone breaking, an ice cream truck song, Velcro, a gun's safety clicking off. No, I thought. Not now. Not here. We slid to a painful stop at the checkout lanes, the impact with the metal jarring every sense out of my body. There was a single moment of agonizing silence before the once dead store lights surged into brightness. And then the cash register flashed on, conveyor belts spluttered to life, first one lane and then the next, and then every single one, falling to order like soldiers. The numbered signs above blinked between yellow and blue like a dozen warning signals, faster than my eyes could follow. At first, I thought it was white noise. All at once, the building's security alarms, intercom systems, and televised displays went off. 100 different voices screaming at us. Block after block of ceiling lights snapped on, electricity pouring through them after years of existing as nothing more than hollow, dusty veins. Liam and I turned to see Zoo, her bare right hand splayed out against the checkout lane. Chubbs was next to her, his face ashen. After only a few seconds of Zoo's power surge, the lights on the register began to pop like firecrackers, dropping streams of blue-white sparks and glass to the ground. She had only meant for it to be a distraction, I think, a flash and a bang to draw the attention of our attackers away from us long enough for an escape. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see her waving us toward her, but the machine under Zoo's other hand had heated to a terrifying molten glow. I felt the invisible grip of me slacken suddenly, but fear kept me still, as the dead. She wasn't letting go. Liam and I must have had the same thought, the same scorching fear, because we pushed to our feet, shouting for her to stop. "Turn her off," someone managed to shout over the alarms. "Zoo, let go." Liam stood and stumbled over cans of sunscreen and bug spray from a nearby display. I saw him lift his arms, ready to yank Zoo away with his abilities, but Chubbs was faster. He tugged the glove off Zoo's other hand and pulled it over his own, and then all but ripped her arm away from the metal. The lights went out just before the overhead bulbs exploded. I saw Zoo's face as she came out of whatever trance she had been locked in. Her big eyes were rimmed with red, her short black hair on end, freckles standing out against the full flush on her oval face. The sudden darkness gave Liam the opportunity to knock both her and Chubbs to the ground, and then by some small miracle, the emergency lights flicked back on. The first sign of movement didn't come from us. I saw our attackers clearly now, climbing over the mangled heaps of white shelves. 4 of them, each dressed in layers of black, each with a gun raised and ready. My first thought, as it almost always was when I saw anyone in a black uniform, was to run, to get the others and bolt. But they weren't PSFs. They weren't even grown-ups. They were kids, like us. Chapter 15. As they came closer, I saw their mismatched dark clothes and the grime on their faces. They were all thin limbs and hollow cheeks, as if they had stretched out a great deal in a short period of time. All boys about my age. All easy to take if we had to. Christ on a cracker, the closest one next to me muttered, shaking his mop of red hair. I told you we should have checked on the van first. Liam's blond hair popped up from behind the wreckage. What the hell are you fools trying to pull? He snarled. There was another sound too, like mewling of a kitten, or a little crying girl. I climbed over a bin of bargain DVDs to get to them. Zoo sat on the floor, her pink palm facing towards Chubbs's squinting eyes. Without the glasses perched on his nose, he looked like a different person. She's all right, he said. No burns. Liam was suddenly standing beside us, using my shoulder for balance as he climbed over one of the overturned shelves. You okay? He asked. Fine, I said. Pissed. You? Fine. Pissed. I thought for sure I was going to have to hold him back as we came closer to the cluster of boys, but his fury seemed to fall away from him with each step. The other kids had regrouped beside an overturned display of neon-colored pool noodles, the tallest one, his cloud of frizzy brown hair hovering around a pencil-thin neck shaped in front of the others. The ginger kid who had spoken before, and 2 big-shouldered blondes that looked like brothers. Look, man, I'm sorry, he said. Do you always do crap like this? Liam said. Attacking folks without even checking to see if they're armed? If they're like you? The leader bristled. You could have been skip tracers. And it was your yellow that did all of this. The ginger kid gestured toward the shelves. That girl needs a leash. Watch your mouth, Liam snapped. The blonde brothers took a step forward, their eyes lighting as at the challenge. She wouldn't have panicked if you hadn't pulled guns on us. We wouldn't have had to use them if you'd paid attention to our warning back there and just left. Because you gave us so much time to get away, Liam snapped. Look, we could go back and forth forever and it won't solve a damn thing, I interrupted. We were both hoping to spend the night here, but if you've claimed it or whatever, then we'll go. That's the only reason we came for shelter. For shelter, the leader repeated. I'm sorry, did I stutter? No, but my ears are still bleeding from your yellow's meltdown, he snarled. Maybe you should just say it again, baby, for good measure. Liam shot out an arm, cutting off my warpath before we could start. We just want to stay here for a night. We're not looking for any kind of trouble, he said flatly. The leader gave me a once-over, his eyes drifting to a stop where my hands were fisted at my side, bunching up at my dress. Looks like you already found it. The leader's name was Greg. He hailed from Meccansville, Virginia. The nervous ginger-haired kid refused to introduce himself, but was called Collins by the others. I caught that he was from some town in Pennsylvania, but that's as much as he was willing to share to anyone. The blondes, who were, I guessed, brothers, were Kyle and Kevin. The only thing the ramshackle group had in common, outside their pool of food and an alarming pile of firearms and knives, was their camp in New York, which they lovingly referred to as Satan's Ass Crack. They told incredibly dramatic and highly improbable tales of their escape from PSF custody over our shared meal of fruit snacks, stale Pringles, and Twinkies. Let me get this straight, said Chubbs, his face etched with disbelief. You were being moved from one camp to another? Greg leaned back against one of the glass freezer doors. They weren't taking us to another camp. They packed up as many guys as they could and said we were being brought to a testing facility in Maryland. Only guys, Chubb said. We didn't have girls there. Greg's voice was heavy with disappointment. That explained a lot, particularly why he seemed to be inching towards me no matter how far I scooted away. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have been loaded up too. I'm surprised they even told you that much, I said, trying to steer the combo back on track. Do you think that's actually where they were bringing you? No, Collins cut in. It was pretty clear they had orders to get rid of us. And a storm flooded the road, flipping the bus and allowing you to escape? That was the part of the story I had problems with too. It was that easy for them, a simple intervention of Mother Nature. They were saved, washed out to freedom in a new biblical style. Where was the detail of PSFs traveling with them? We'd been holed up ever since. It took something like 6 months to get word to my dad that I was out and safe, and another 3 to get some kind of response from him. Chubbs leaned forward. How exactly did you get in touch with them? The internet? Nah, man, Greg said. After that terrorist business, you can't even search for recipes online without the PSF snooping and breaking down your door. All they need is one whiff of trouble. What terrorists? I interrupted. The League, Chubb said. Don't you remember? Ah. He seemed to realize his mistake a second late. It with more patience than I thought he possessed, explained. 3 years ago, the League hacked into the government's PSI databases and tried posting information about the camps online for everyone to see. Other groups took that as their cue to hack into banks and stock exchange, the State Department. So they cracked down on it? Right. Most of the social networking sites are gone, and all the email services are required to monitor the emails being sent on their servers. He turned to the other boys, who were staring at me with varying degrees of interest and curiosity. I don't think Kevin, or was it Kyle, had stopped staring at me the entire time I had sat there. How then? Easy, Greg said, with a highly unnecessary wink in my direction. We used what was left. We used what was left. I put an ad in my hometown paper with a message only my brother would get. I didn't need to look at Chubbs to know that he had narrowed his eyes. He tensed behind me. And who paid for this ad? The editors didn't just let you put that in there for free, did they? No, the slip kid paid, Greg said. He set everything up for me. I sat up straight, kicking aside some empty foil wrappers. You've actually been in contact with the slip kid? Oh, yes, he's like a god, Collins said, his breath rushing out. He gathered all of us together, kids from all over New England and the South, every color, older kids, younger ones too. They said the PSF stay away from his court in the woods because they're afraid of him. That he set up his camp on fire and killed all the PSFs sent to bring him back. Who is he? I asked. The 4 of them grinned at one another, the jumping shadows from the emergency lights making them look even smugger. What else? Chubb said, sucking all of this down eagerly. How was he able to send the money for the ad? What's East River like? Where is it? I glanced back over my shoulder to Liam, who stood behind me, leaning against what used to be a TV dinner freezer. He's been strangely quiet the entire time, his lips pressed tight against one another, but his face otherwise perfectly devoid of emotion. They have a sweet setup at East River, Collins said, but if you want to get to East River, you have to find it for yourself. Sounds that way, Liam said finally. Are there a lot of kids there? The 4 of them had to think about this. More than 100, but not like in the thousands, Greg said. Why? Liam shook his head, but I was surprised to see a hint of disappointment there. Just wondering. Most never were in camps, I take. Some, Greg shrugged, and some found it after dodging skip tracer or PSF custody. And the slip kid, he doesn't have. Liam seemed to struggle to figure out how he was going to ask this question. He doesn't have plans for them, does he? What's his endgame? The others seemed to find the question as strange as I did. It wasn't until Greg said, no endgame, just living, I guess, that I realized I hadn't once thought about the reason why Liam would be looking for the slip kid. I'd just assumed he and the others wanted to find him to get home and to deliver Jack's letter. But if that's really the case, what had sparked the fire in Liam's eyes? His hands were stuffed in his jacket pockets, and I could see the outline of them curling into fists. What about directions? I asked. Well, now, something changed in Greg's expression. A slick smile took over his face as his free hand landed on my foot. The brothers, Kyle and Kevin, hadn't said a word since we'd sat down in their makeshift encampment in the freezer aisles, but now looked at each other with identical expressions of knowing. I tried to gulp back revulsion rising in me. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you, Greg said, his fingers sliding up from my shoe to stroke my ankle. I started to push away, but stopped when he added, it's in a really great location near the coast, but there just aren't a whole lot of girls. They could use something so nice to look at. His fingers moved again, tracing a line up my calf. You should go. It's safer than getting caught by one of the tribes. There's a group of blue kids that hang out around Norfolk. They're nasty. Steal the clothes right off your back. There was a tribe of yellows around here for a while, but a kid we were in camp with claims they were all taken in by PSFs. All of this tribe stuff was new to me. Kids banding together and roving the countryside, trying to avoid getting caught, taking care of one another. Amazing. Greg's warm, fleshy palm continued its ascent until it swallowed up my knee and squeezed, and that was as far as he was ever going to get. I felt a trickle at the back of my mind, the buzz that pushed past even my anger, and had to close my eyes at a flash of images that followed. A glimpse of shining yellow shell of a school bus coming down a dirt road, a woman's blurry face, her mouth moving in a silent song, a campfire flaring up into the night sky, the faces of Kevin and Kyle leaning close with what looked like a clock radio in the middle of a trashed electronics store. The numbers face on the clock's face were climbing, but not counting time. There They lit an electric green glow in the dark display. 310, 400, 460, 500. Finally, it stopped on. My hand clenched into a fist as I started to detach from both Greg and his silky warmth of memories. But Chubbs was already there. He reached across my lap and began to peel Greg's fingers off, one by one, with a look of pure disdain. For his part, Greg only looked slightly dazed, his eyes glassy, unaware of what I had just done. I glanced around wildly, my heart lodged somewhere between my mouth and my chest, but no one seemed to have noticed my slip. The only one who moved was Chubbs, and it was just a scoot closer to me. Damn it, I thought, squeezing my eyes shut again. One hand drifted up to press the back of my forehead, as if I could hold back the invisible fingers there by force. Too close. That was way too close. What was that kid's name again? The yellow who worked with us in the kitchen? Fred? Frank? Collins lay back down in his sleeping bag, folding his hands over his chest. Felipe. Felipe Marino? Greg's eyes came back into full focus and continued up my legs, past where his hand had been allowed. Felipe? Liam interrupted, as if coming out of a trance. Did you say Felipe Marco? You know him? Liam nodded. We traveled together for a while. Must have been just before his ass got caught here, Greg said. He was the one that told us about this place. Said he was here with his friend. That you? Yeah, what happened to him? Liam knelt, wedging himself between Greg and me. They brought us to separate camps. Greg shrugged. He was in one of the earlier buses. They were taking him to Maryland. Who knows? So the yellows at their camp had been removed too. They must have only been taken from the bigger camps, not the smaller ones, that had been cobbled together further west. I missed that kid. He was smart, knew how to use his powers. Better than your pet, at least. Might as well send her back for all the good she's doing for you. Greg nodded toward Zoo, who was sitting with her back to us, working through pages of multiplication problems Liam made for her. And that was about as much as I could take. You have 2 seconds to tell me where you're kidding, I said, or I'm punching you in the face. Do it, Chubbs hissed beside me. But Liam put a firm hand on my shoulder, effectively shutting down any chance I had of making good on my threat. He kept his face passive, easygoing, but his breath hitched in his throat. He stretched his fingers out, brushing them against mine on the floor. I jolted at the touch, but couldn't bring myself to pull away. Greg held up his hands. All I'm saying is, if there's something off about her, she's not like the others, is she? He leaned closer. Is she retarded? Did they do testing on her? She's mute, not deaf, Liam cut in smoothly, and I promise you, she's probably 5 times smarter than the 7 of us put together. I'm not so sure about that, Chubbs began. Liam silenced him with a look and brought his lips down next to me. Take Zoo? I nodded, my fingers tapping his to show that I understood. I pushed myself up off the ground and feeling calmer now. When I reached Zoo, I held out my hand to her. She raised hers without looking up, blindly reaching for mine. I stared at the yellow gloves in front of me, streaked with dirt and black grime, and despite what had happened a few minutes before, pulled it right off her little fingers. I couldn't say why I had done it. Maybe being so close to Liam and not losing control had made me stupidly brave, or maybe I was just sick of the reality that forced her into them. All I knew was for sure that if I never saw Zoo wear those gloves again, it would be too soon. Zoo jerked when she felt the warmth of my skin against hers. tried to tug away. Her eyes went wide, but I couldn't tell if it was from worry or wonder. Come on, I said, squeezing her hand. Girl time. Her face brightened, but she didn't smile. Don't go too far, Liam called after us. Don't go too far, the other boys echoed, then burst out into laughter. Zoo's nose wrinkled in disgust. I know what you mean, I said, and took her as far away from them as I could. For the first 10 minutes or so, we spent time walking around the store. Zoo kept turning to look at our linked hands as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Every now and then, some bin of unwanted DVDs or an aisle end cap of pointless knickknacks would catch her attention, but dark eyes would always wander back to where our hands swung between us. We had just turned down one of the many ravaged cleaning supply aisles when she gave my arm a tug. What's wrong? I asked, kicking aside a stray mop. Zoo pointed at the glove I was twirling around with my free hand. I lifted our hands between us. What's so bad about this? She blew out a breath that she had been holding, and it was evident I had missed the point. I was dragged all the way to the other end of the aisle, where she let go of my hand and snatched a white box from the shelf. Zoo went to work tearing the box open, tossing aside the foam and plastic, stuffing to get the old-fashioned silver toaster inside. I'm not sure we're going to need that, I started slowly. She pinned me with a look that very clearly said, Quiet, please. She tugged the other glove off her hand and then spread all 10 fingers out along either side of her appliance. After a moment, I saw her shut her dark eyes. The metal piping that served as the toaster's innards heated to a glowing red. A long black cord dangled near her feet, unplugged. The cheap little thing only lasted another minute before its inside started to melt together. I made her put it down at the first sign of smoke. See, she seemed to be saying, get it? But you can't do that to me, I said, reaching for her hand again. You don't have to worry about hurting me, because you never could. I know how it feels, is what I really should have been saying. I know what it feels like to be scared of what you can barely control. I had forced myself to stop thinking about what I had done to that undercover PSF. I didn't let myself wonder if I could do it again, let alone test it out. But how, I wondered, were either of us ever going to learn to control ourselves if we couldn't practice, if we couldn't stretch and test boundaries? Let's see if we can find something useful, I said, slipping my fingers around hers again. I waited until I felt her hand close against mine before leading her back down the aisle. What do you think? I'm not even sure what I was about to ask her, but she wasn't paying attention to me. Zoo stopped so suddenly and gripped my hand so damn hard that I stumbled back a few steps. My eyes followed the line of her outstretched arms to the upended clothing and shoe racks. More specifically, to the lone, hot pink dress dangling from the otherwise empty rack. Zoo took off at a run, blitzing down aisles of extension cords and buckets. I tried to keep up with her, but it was like the wind had caught her heels and was propelling her forward. She stopped just short of the rack. I watched, fascinated, as one of her hands reached out to stroke the fabric, only to pull back at the last second. Beautiful, I told her. The dress itself flared out at the waist with a big ribbon bow at the place where the sleeveless top met the pink and white striped skirt. She looked like she wanted nothing more than to pull it down, hug it to her chest, and press her face against the satiny fabric. I could think about 1,000 things I missed while I was at Thurmond, but dresses were not on that list. My dad's favorite story to tell strangers and indulgent relatives was the day he and Mom tried to button me into a blue one for his birthday party when I was 3. Because the buttons were so small and impossible for me to reach, I shredded the fabric by hand, bit by gauzy bit. I spent the rest of the party proudly parading around in Batman underwear. Are you going to try it on? I asked. She looked back at me and shook her head. Her hands dropped from where they were hanging, hovering over the plastic hangers, and it took me a moment to recognize what was happening. Zoo thought she didn't deserve it. She thought it was too nice, too new, too pretty. I felt a sweltering hate rise in me, but I didn't know where to direct it. Her parents for sending her away? Her camp? The PSFs? I pulled the dress off the silver rack with one hand and took Zoo's arm with the other. I knew she was looking at me again, her dark eyes wide with confusion, but instead of explaining, instead of trying to force her to understand the words I wanted to say, I led her over to the dressing rooms in the center of the clothing section, thrust the dress in her hands, and told her to try it on. It was like tugging a boat into dock on a thin line. The first few times I handed it to her, She would put it down, and I'd have to pick it back up again. I don't know if her desire finally went out, or if I'd managed to exhaust even her wariness. But by the time she appeared, peeking out from around her dressing room's door, I was so relieved I almost cried. You look amazing. I turned her back around so she could see herself in the room's tall mirror. When I finally coaxed her to look, I felt her shoulders jerk under my hands, saw her eyes go huge and bright, only droop again a moment later. Her fingers began to pluck at the fabric. She was shaking her head as if to say, "No, no, I can't." "Why not?" I asked, turning so she could look right at me. "You like it, right?" She didn't look up, but I saw her nod. "Then what's the problem?" At that, I caught her sneak another look at herself in the corner of the mirror. Her hands were smoothing the fabric of the skirt, and she didn't even seem aware of it in the slightest. "That's right," I said. "There is no problem. Let's see what else we can find." I wanted to find something for me. Unsurprisingly, the adult section had been decimated by looters. My choices seemed limited to hunting gear and industrial jumpsuits. After several patient explanations about why I didn't need a silky cornflower blue nightgown or the skirt with the daisies on it, she, with a look of total and complete exasperation, accepted that I was only ever going to try on jeans and plain t-shirts. And then she pointed to the bra rack, and part of me wanted to crawl under the discarded piles of kid pajamas and die. The letters and numbers might as well have been in Chinese for how much I could start to make sense of them, and I half expected Zoo to start laughing when the first touch of frustrated tears welled in my eyes. There were not many times I'd stop and think, I wish my mom were here. I understand now, at least, that what I had done to her I could never fix. She would never look at me again and recognize me, and I would never be able to think of anything other than that look in her eyes when she saw me that morning. It was strange how my feelings about her seemed to change by the minute. That one moment I could remember what it felt like for her to brush my hair, and the next be furious that she had abandoned me. That she hadn't taught me how to live in my own skin and be a girl, like she was supposed to. But whose fault was that, really? Zoo's lips puckered at the thought, her eyebrows knitting together as she surveyed the Everest of undergarments in front of us. She began to pluck one of every size, tossing them back toward me until both of us were laughing ourselves silly for no reason at all. Eventually, I found what I thought might have been the right fit for me. It was hard to tell, but they had all been so damn uncomfortable with their wires and pinched straps. While I changed out of my dress, Zoo happily pulled together an outfit for herself that looked like something out of a store catalog. The pink dress, white leggings beneath it, and a jean jacket that was one or two sizes too big for her. The rest of the things she found were stuffed into a flower-patterned backpack I pulled off a display for her. Now that she had found her own things, she wanted to go the whole hog and pick out things for the boys too. When I found her a new pair of tennis shoes with rosy laces, she actually wrapped her arms around my waist and hugged me, like she could squeeze the thanks into me. While Zoo was not especially impressed by the pair of short black boots I found for myself in the men's section, she didn't try to force any ribbon flats or towering high heels on me. Zoo was in the process of neatly folding a button-down shirt she had chosen for Chubbs when I remembered something. "I'll be right back," I told her. "Wait right here, okay?" It took me a minute to find the aisle again. Liam and I had walked past it so quickly as we made our way toward the back of the store. I wasn't altogether sure I'd imagined seeing it, but there they were, just above the cleaning supplies, a bright pair of pink rubber gloves dangling amid a sea of traditional yellow ones. "Hey, Zoo," I called out as I made my way back to her. I dangled them out in front of me and waited for her to turn around. When she did, her mouth actually fell open. She was so dazzled by her new gloves that she walked with her hands outstretched in front of her, the way a princess examining the collection of fine jewelry around her fingers and wrists would. I watched her curtsy and twirl in her new dress as we lapped the store, all the white, all the while her feet dancing over the evidence of what had happened at the checkout lanes. Watching her, feeling the exhilaration swelling in my chest, I couldn't say I was all that aware of the broken glass and flickering monitor displays either. We turned down the dimly lit corridor of cosmetics, and I could barely keep the grin off my face. Liam found us there a short while later, just as Zoo was tying off the braid she'd woven into my hair with a glittery hair tie. I sat on the tile as she sat on the shelf behind me like some fairy queen. "Magnificent," I told her, when she held a broken mirror out to my face. "You are incredible." and my reward for that was the feeling of her arms, bird-like bones, twining around my neck. I twisted around so that I was facing her, because I wanted to see her face. I wanted her to see my face. I wanted her to see how serious, how sincerely I meant it when I repeated myself. You are incredible. You two have been busy, I see. Liam leaned against the aisle's end cap, eyebrows raised. Zoo bounded towards him, scooping up the shirts and socks she picked for him. Thank you. Oh, God, Chubbs is going to piss his pants when he sees this. His hands came down to rest atop her head. Geez, I leave you two alone for a little while and you clean out the joint. Good job. I pushed myself up off the floor, helping them gather up the rest of the clothes and supplies we'd managed to scrounge up. That done, we started our slow, reluctant shuffle back to the others. All three of us seemed to be aware that once we left that peaceful moment, it would be behind us forever. Zoo had only just started out a few steps ahead of us when Liam turned to me and said, Thanks for doing this. I'm glad you got what I meant. He gave my braid a little playful tug. I just wanted to ask them a few more questions. And you didn't want, I nodded towards Zoo, to hear? He looked down at his feet, and when he looked back up, his ears were pink. Yeah, but also, you were kind of distracting them. What? I'm sorry, I threatened them or whatever, but no, distracting them, Liam repeated, with your face. Oh, I recovered quickly. Did you get anything useful out of them? The names of a few friendlier tribes, a few cities under lockdown for insurrection, stuff like that. I just wanted to get a sense of what was happening in Virginia. I meant about the slip kit, I said, maybe a little too eagerly. Nothing we didn't have before. Apparently everyone takes some sacred oath not to reveal more information than that. Totally ridiculous. They really wouldn't give you any more information, I said. Liam looked down at the ground. Greg made us an offer, a trade, but we turned him down. What did he want? What was so valuable that they wouldn't trade it for one thing that would reunite them with their families? Black Betty? Doesn't matter, Liam said, and there was a finality in his tone. If those numbnuts managed, I'm sure we can find the East River ourselves, eventually. Yeah, I said with a light laugh. True. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched him hoist the pile of clothes onto his shoulder, his gaze never leaving where Zoo was hopping and skipping through the field of cans and old magazines. I glanced down at a blonde movie star's face as we passed it, my eyes falling over the words, She finally tells all, printed under her face. Can I ask you something? Of course, he said. What's up? Why are you looking for the slip kid? I asked. I felt his eyes on me, and I knew he was expecting an explanation was coming. I mean, besides wanting to help Chubbs and Sue get there and trying to deliver Jack's letter, is it because you want to go home or any reason in particular you're asking? His voice was even. Testing. The question you were asking them about the camp, I explained. It just seemed like you were trying to figure something out. Liam didn't reply for a long while. Not until the tents they'd set up for the nights were in sight. Even then, it wasn't an answer. Why do you want to find the slip kid? Because I want to be able to see my grandmother. Because I need to get an understanding on how to control my abilities before they destroy everyone I care about. But you didn't answer my question. Zoo dashed through our tent flap, and the lantern in the tent lit up Chubb's delighted face. When she handed him new things over, he folded her into his enormous hug, lifting her off her feet with the force of it. It's the same as you, he said. I just want to get home. Where's that? See, that's the funny thing, he said. It used to be North Carolina, but I'm not so sure anymore. We stood, staring at each other for a moment, nearly toe to toe, and when he lifted the flap of the tent for me, I couldn't help but wonder if he picked up on my half-truth as easily as I had picked up on his. Chapter 16. It was an hour, maybe more, before Liam's breathing evened out and he began to snore. He fell asleep, flat on his back, his hands resting against the soft flannel of his shirt. His face, which had earlier seemed marked by old, bruising shadows, looked young again. He might have been able to pass as a 20-year-old with his facial scruff and a solid build, but he didn't fool anyone while tucked away in sleep. His face was turned toward Zoo, who slept between us under a mountain of blankets and was currently the only thing that was keeping me from inching closer to him, from slipping my hand under his bigger one and learning the contents of his dreams. But the distance between us was there for a reason. Imagining a future erased myself from his memories, kept my hands pinned under my legs, and my mind for once in check. When I heard Greg and his pals stir in their tent next to ours, I gave up all pretenses of sleep. Their voices began as a low murmur, indistinguishable from one another, and grew louder as the minutes ticked by. Finally, they turned on their lanterns to the lowest setting, just enough to be visible through our own green tent's shell. I slipped out of the other side of the tent, careful to keep my footsteps soft against the concrete. Their whispers grew in volume and urgency the closer I came. Them, Greg mumbled. We don't owe them anything. My hands clenched at my side, all of the anxiety and distrust that had been swelling up inside me over the past few hours coming to a head. For a single second, I wished I had brought my backpack inside the store with me. There was a panic button there, waiting to be used if the situation blew up fast and ugly. Stupid Ruby, I thought. Stupid. I wasn't worried about taking care of Greg and his friends. Even with their guns, we still had a chance. But if they tried to pull something while we were asleep, or if they called in reinforcements, my feet stopped mid-stride. Chubbs had beaten me to guard duty. He sat, facing the tents, his long, spidery legs crossed in front of him, and Zoo's workbook in his lap. He was leaning towards the others' tents, concentrating so hard on picking up their conversation that he missed my approach and nearly jumped out of his skin when I appeared. Zoo? He squinted in my direction. Zoo? I whispered back. Really? I mean, really. I took Zoo's workbook and pencil out of his hands and flipped the pages without looking at whatever he had been writing. What are you doing? I wrote, showing it to him. He rolled his eyes and refused to respond when I tried to put the pencil back in his hand. Do you think they're going to try something? After a moment, he sighed and finally nodded. Me too, I scribbled. Come with me? By the way his shoulders slumped, Chubb seemed to think he didn't have much of a choice. He stood quickly and quietly, wiping his palms against the front of his khaki pants. I have a bad feeling about this, Chubb said, when we were out of earshot. The tents were in our line of sight, but we weren't in theirs. About them. Do you think they're going to try to rob us? I think they're going to try to take Betty, actually. There was a long pause. I felt Chubbs's eyes slide over me, but my own were fixed on the tents to watch for trouble. You should go back to sleep. There was a gruff edge to his voice as he crossed his arms over his chest, but there was also something about the way he said it that made me wonder if he was waiting to see what I would reply. What are you even doing up? Same as you, I guess, I said, making sure no one gets brutally mugged, beaten, or murdered in their sleep, watching to see if those kids are the assholes I think they are. Chubb snorted at that, rubbing his hands over his forehead. It took some time in silence, but I felt the air between us ease from a guarded hostility to something that felt like an acceptance. His shoulders were no longer bunched up with tension, and when he tilted his head toward me, I saw it for the subtle invitation it was. I took a step closer. It was bad enough he had to come back here, Chubbs mumbled more to himself than to me. God. Liam? I asked. This is where he and his friend were captured, right? Chubbs nodded. He never told me the whole story, but I think what happened was that he and Felipe were traveling and ran into a tribe of blues. Instead of recruiting them like Lee hoped, the tribe beat the hell out of them and stole everything they had. Food, packs, family pictures, you name it. They came here for a few days to regroup, but they were in such bad shape that they couldn't get away when the skip tracers finally showed up. Something hard finally settled in my throat. Lee thinks that the tribe called them in, Chubbs continued, that they got a cut of the reward. I didn't know what to say. The thought of a kid, of any of us, turning against one of our own kind made me want to smash the shelf we were leaning against into a heap of metal. I trust Liam, I said slowly. He's such a good person, and he's so easy for others to read, and they don't have the best intentions. Exactly, Chubb said. He's so busy looking inside people to find the good that he misses the knife they're holding in their hand. And even then, he'd probably blame himself for the person having the knife to begin with, and apologize for being such a tempting target. That was what troubled me the most about Leo. If he had any more trusting and good-hearted, he would have been a Boy Scout. It was either an amazing feat of stubbornness or naivety. I thought, for someone who had been through so much death and suffering, to still believe so unconditionally that everyone was as stand-up as he was, it was something that inspired both exasperation and a fierce sense of protectiveness in me. And Chubbs, too, it seemed. I think we both know he's far from perfect, no matter how hard he tries, Chubb said, settling himself down on the ground and leaning back against the empty shelf. He's never been a big thinker, that one. Always rush, 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 rushing to do whatever his gut tells him to do. and then drowning in his own self-pity and guilt when things blow up in his face. I nodded, absently fiddling with a tear in my sleeve of the new plaid shirt I hadn't noticed before taking it. After hearing Liam and Zoo, I knew that he felt an intense guilt over what had happened the night of their breakout, but it sounded like it might have run even deeper than that. I can fix that for you later, Chubbs nodded toward the torn fabric. His long fingers were splayed out over his knees, tapping against the bones. Just remind me. Who taught you how to sew anyway? I asked. Apparently it was not the right question to ask. Chubbs went back stiff and straight, like I had dropped an ice cube down the back of his shirt. I don't know how to sew, he snapped. I learned how to stitch. Sewing is for decoration. Stitching is for saving lives. I don't do this because I think it's pretty or fun. I do it for practice. He stared at me over the rim of his glasses, waiting to see if I got what he was trying to say. My dad taught me how to stitch before I went into hiding, he said finally, in case of emergencies. Is your dad a doctor? I asked. He's a trauma surgeon. Chubbs didn't bother to hide the pride in his voice. One of the best in the DC area. What does your mom do? She used to work for the Department of Defense, but got fired when she refused to register me into the Ian database. I don't know what she's doing now. They sound great, I said. Chubb snorted, but I could see him warm to the compliment. The minutes dragged by, and the conversation waned, but I found myself reaching for Zoo's notebook, flipping it open to the beginning. The first few pages were mostly sketches and doodles, but I gave away to page after page of math problems. Liam's handwriting was neat and precise, and surprisingly, so was Zoo's. Betty traveled 118 miles in 3 hours. How fast was Lee driving? You have 5 Snickers bars to share with 3 friends. You cut them in half. How many will each friend get? How can you make sure the leftovers get shared equally so Chubbs doesn't complain? And then I got to the page with completely different handwriting, messy and smeared. The letters were darker, as if the writer had been pressing down on the paper too hard. I'm not sure what else can be said about this book that hasn't already been said. I'm out of clever things to say, I'm afraid. Jonathan Swift has always been my favorite, but I can't get over how clever his wordplay is throughout the novel. I really can't get over how similar it is to Robinson Crusoe at the time, especially when he's on the ship to Lilliput. Though his interaction with the Lilliputans wasn't the strongest section, you would be hard-pressed to find equally clever interplay of parody and originality. I can see why the book has been studied so carefully by scholars over the years. We met Gulliver as a dreamy young man in search of adventure, trying to get anywhere that would involve sea travel, and see him involved masterfully. If I had to name the best section of the book, it would probably be the Laputan section, a place I would greatly like to visit, because my own head is often stuck in the clouds, and to be able to study philosophy and mathematics all day, a dream. There was a time or two over the course of the novel that I felt Swift had gone overboard and missed some opportunities to drive home his idea of what the ideal society should be. You, as a reader, are left to figure it out for yourself. This book is perfect if you love a thought-provoking literature from an objective, rational viewpoint, or if you dream about one day traveling the world yourself. I held the page up for him to see. This yours? Give me that, he said. His face was wild with panic. Not just panic. By the way his nostrils flared and his hand shook, it was almost like I scared him half to death. Guilt shot through me. I passed it back to him and watched him tear the sheet of paper out. Hey, I'm sorry, I said, worried about the tinge of green coloring his face. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just wondering why you'd practice writing essays when you said you didn't think we'd ever go back to school. He continued to stare at me for several seconds until his stony expression gave. Chubbs blew out a breath he'd been holding. I'm not practicing for school. Instead of tucking the sheet of paper inside the briefcase, he laid it out between us. Before camp, my parents thought the PSFs were investigating them, which, they were. They sent me up to my grandparents' cabin to hide, and if you remember what I said about the internet being policed, we had to find a way around it, especially when they started putting pressure on Mom at work. I glanced down at the sheet of paper again. So, you used to send book reviews? I had a laptop and a few wireless internet cards, he said. We would post book reviews online. It was the only way we could think to talk without them catching on. He leaned over, covering the paper so only the first column of words was visible. I'm out. Can't get to you. Meet anywhere. Name, place, and time. Missed you. Love you. Oh. I wanted to write it out now, Chubb said, in case I can get online, but only have a few minutes. You're pretty genius, I said slowly. Your whole family. I got a snort in response. Duh. The question I really wanted to ask him was inching its way up my throat when he pulled the deck of cards out of his briefcase. Want to play a few games? He asked. We're going to be here a while. Sure, but I only know Old Maid and Go Fish. Well, he cleared his throat. We don't have the right deck for Old Maid, and unfortunately for you, I excel at Go Fish. I won the Go Fish tournament in 5th grade. I grinned, waiting for him to deal my cards. You're a star, Chubbs. He wrinkled his nose at the name. I can't call you by anything else if I don't know your real name. Charles, he replied. Charles Carrington Merriweather the Fourth, actually. I tried to keep my face as straight as possible. Of course he would be named something like that. Okay, Charles. Charlie? Chuck? Chip? Chip? I don't know. I thought it was kind of cute. Ugh, just call me Chubbs. Everyone else does. I figured it out. It must have been 5:30 in the morning, well after several delirious games of cards and charades that had been brought on by too much candy and too little sleep. Both of us had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, to be proven right about the other boys. We kept the baseball bat right beside us, and never once turned our backs to the tents. When exhaustion finally set in, we took turns curled up on the ground trying to steal a few minutes of sleep here and there. I picked up Zoo's notebook again in an attempt to avoid being lulled to sleep by Chubbs's rhythmical snores, and added a few clouds and stars to the first page of doodles. The pages fanned out under my fingers as I flipped through the notebook again, not catching until I found what I was looking for. 540. That was an area code for this part of the state, I was sure of it. Grams had lived down near the Charlottesville at the time, and I had a very vague memory of standing in my kitchen of my parents' house, staring at her number printed on the notepad beside the phone. But the area is covered. That was no small bit of land, and there was no real guarantee that it was supposed to represent an area code in the first place. It was easier to think of it now without three eager sets of eyes on me. It's slightly complicated by the fact that I was running on fumes, sleep-wise. With more than enough time to kill, I started in again, rearranging them, trying to create anagrams, substituting different letters for others. The feeling snuck up on me slowly, crawling back through the crowded, tired portions of my brain. The other number, 540. Where had I seen it? Why did it feel like... When it came to me, I almost laughed. Almost. I had seen the number on the radio in Greg's memory only a few hours earlier, burning brightly through even the murkiest clouds of his thoughts. It was 5:40 a.m., the radio station. Shaking Chubbs back awake wasn't enough for me, not when I thought I would actually burst at the seams with excitement. I all but pounced onto Chubbs's back, both scaring him senseless and kneeling him in the kidney in the process. I'm not sure that sound he made when I landed, but I'm fairly certain it wasn't human. Wake up! Wake up! I hissed, hauling him, huffing and puffing and cursing, to his feet. When they gave you EDO, did they say anything else? Green, if I can still walk tomorrow, so help me God. Listen to me, I hissed. Did they say anything about tuning in or picking it up? He fixed me with a baleful look. All they said was to check out EDO. Check out? I repeated, those exact words. Yes, he said, exasperated. Why? I was wrong before, I said. I don't think the number has anything to do with a phone number. We were right before. The last letter isn't a letter at all. It's supposed to be a 0. 540. It's some kind of radio station. How in the world did you reach that conclusion? The tricky part in all of this. How to BS the fact that I had cheated and seen the answer. Rather than being in possession of brain power to actually work through it, I was trying to think of what else uses three-digit numbers when I remembered hearing them. Greg and the others, I mean. Talk about needing to find a radio here. I should have mentioned it to you guys before, but I didn't think anything of it until now. Oh my God, Chubbs was shaking his head, mildly stunned. I don't believe it. We have honestly had such shit luck this entire trip. I thought at least 2 of us were going to end up dead in a ditch somewhere before we figured it out. We need a radio, I said. I think I'm right, but if I'm not, we need to test it before telling the others. Betty? No. I wasn't about to leave the tent unguarded for even 15 minutes. I thought I saw a radio in the back. Let me go grab it. The store was rushing around me in dark streams and fading colors as I ran, but I wasn't afraid of what was lurking there, not now. I hadn't imagined the radio after all. It was black in the small cluster of wraps and blankets that Liam and his friend had set up the last time he was here. Chubbs had paced in front of the shelves by the time I got back. I set the small device up on a shelf and that was about eye level and began to fuss with its buttons, searching for the on switch. I had to be the one to start it up and the one to fumble with the volume knob when it just about blew our eardrums out with static. The thing was ancient, a beat up silver box, but it worked. The speakers jumped between voices and commercials, and even a few old songs I recognized. It has to be AM, Chubb said, taking the radio in his hands. FM frequencies don't go up past 108 or so. Here we go. The first thought was that Chubbs had somehow tuned it to the wrong station. I had never heard a sound like the one sputtering through the speakers. A low growl of static, pierced by what sounded like a tub of broken glass being tossed around. It wasn't painful like white noise, but it wasn't pleasant either. But Chubbs was still grinning. Do you know what this is? He asked, and was all too happy to explain when I shook my head. Have you ever heard that there are certain frequencies and pitches only kids with PSI brain can pick up? He braced a hand on the top shelf to keep from doubling over. I had. Kate had told me as much when she explained the camp controllers had embedded a certain frequency in white noise to root out any dangerous ones still hiding in the other cabins. It's not so much that others can't hear the noise, it's that their brains translate the sounds differently than ours do. Really fascinating stuff. They did some testing with it at Caledonia to see if there were any pitches that certain colors couldn't pick up and others could, and it always sounded like this when we couldn't. No sooner had the words left his mouth than there was a sharp click. The noises cut off together, replaced by a soft male voice whispering, "If you can hear this, you're one of us. If you're one of us, you can find us. Lake Prince, Virginia." That same message 3 times before it clicked again and switched back to the frequency we had heard before. For a long time, Chubbs and I could only stare at one another, speechless. "Oh my God," Chubbs said. "Oh my God." And then we were saying it together, jumping up and down, arms flung around one another like two damn fools, like we had never ever wanted to reach over and slap each other multiple times on multiple days. I hugged him without any kind of fear or self-consciousness, fiercely with a rush of emotion that almost brought tears to my eyes. "I could kiss you," Chubbs cried. "Please don't," I gasped out, feeling his arms tighten around my ribs to the point of cracking them. Either by his internal clock or Chubbs's excitement squeaks, Liam woke first. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, his head tousled blond hair sticking out of the tent. He looked between us once and retreated back into the tent, only to re-emerge a second later, looking torn between worried and confused. "What's wrong?" he asked. "What's going on?" Chubbs and I glanced at each other, wearing identical grins. "Get Zoo," I said. "You guys are going to want to hear this." Chapter 17. According to Chubbs, Jack Fields was the second son in a family of 5 kids, and the only one to survive the idiopathic adolescent acute neurodegeneration. His father had owned an Italian restaurant, and his mother died of cancer when he was young. Jack was unremarkable in appearance, the kind of kid you would pass in the school hallway and not think twice about. But he was stealth cool, the only one in their room that knew what Liam was talking about when he started in on Japanese horror flicks or articles in the back issues of Rolling Stone. Apparently, he liked to tell stories in weird voices and spent years scratching out a replica of New York City's skyline on the converted classroom's blackboards. The PSFs assigned to their room had been so impressed by the sheer detail of his work that they actually let him finish. More importantly, Jack took great pleasure in antagonizing the camp controllers by using his abilities to lift things off their belts and out of their pockets, or throw things into their paths so that they'd trip and fall in front of everyone. To hear Chubbs talk, you would have thought Jack Fields was a saint walking on earth, a disciple of awesome, preaching the proper way to use their blue abilities after spending years figuring it out for himself. Which was probably why he was the first one the camp controllers shot in the back of the head the night the kids tried to make their escape. Liam was silent when we approached Petersburg outer city limits, only nodding once or twice to confirm that the craziest parts of Chubbs's tale were true. He had been just as excited as the two of us when we dragged him over to listen to the broadcast, but slowly, over the course of a few hours, his mood had deteriorated. When Chubbs's story died out, so did all the conversation in the van. "It's supposed to be really beautiful there," I said, suddenly, then winced at how awkward it sounded. Lake Prince, I mean. Liam didn't look stressed so much as profoundly sad. That was what worried me, that he was sinking into something that not even our breakthrough could pull him out of. "I'm sure you're right," he said quietly. He handed me a half-folded map. "Could you put this back in the glove box?" I certainly hadn't looked for it when I opened the small compartment, But there they were, nested on top of a pile of crumpled napkins. Truthfully, I had been expecting envelopes, or at least lined notebook papers, which was stupid and didn't make any sense. Because it's not like their camp had arts and craft days, and it's not like they were just given the paper and pens. Still, I had expected the letter to be something heavier, for Chubbs and Liam to be carrying theirs with them. Jack's letter was on top, written on half of what looked like a computer printout folded over several times. He had managed to squeeze his father's name in tight capital letters on the back of the paper between large black words, area restricted. Instead of putting the map away, I took the letter out, only vaguely aware of the argument Liam and Chubbs had gotten over into the best route to Lake Prince. I wasn't thinking of anything as I slid my fingers over the wrinkled surface, smoothing it out as I unfolded it. No date in the upper right corner, just a hasty, straight to the point, "Dear Dad." I didn't get to take in another word. Liam reached over and ripped the paper out of my hand, crumbling it slightly in his fist. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm sorry, You just what?" he barked. I felt my body jerk in response. "It's personal. It's none of your business, what it says." "Lee," Chubb said, every bit as surprised as I felt. "Come on." "No, this is serious. We don't read each other's letters." "Never?" I said. "What if you can't find this dad, and the letter might be some clue about where he might be?" Liam was shaking his head. Even Chubb said, "She has a point." He said nothing, but his hands trembled on the steering wheel. It was his silence that stung, and when I couldn't take another second of it, I reached over and turned on the radio, sending up a prayer that an Allman Brothers song would be on. Instead, Betty picked up a news talk show. Children are in containment for their own good, not just for the safety of the American public. My well-placed sources in the Gray administration have informed me that all instances in which a child has been removed from rehabilitation early have resulted in their untimely death. There is simply no way to reproduce the routine of medication, exercise, and stimulation these rehab centers are using to keep your children alive. Liam punched a knuckle against the volume button, trying to turn it off. Instead, the tuner jumped to the next available station, and this time it was a woman's voice delivering bad news. Sources are reporting that 2 PSI fugitives were picked up in Ohio, West Virginia border, traveling on foot. Betty turned so hard and fast into the empty rest stop that I swore she did it on 2 wheels. Liam parked diagonally across 3 different spaces, throwing the brake on with a fast, "Be right back." 1 minute he was beside me, and the next we were watching the back of his red flannel shirt as he jumped over a puddle of stale rainwater and headed for the colonial-style brick building and vending machines. That was dramatic. I turned to look at Chubbs over the seat, but he was just as confused as I was. "You should probably follow him," Chubbs said. "What should I say?" Chubbs gave me one of his looks. "Really? You need me to spell it out for you?" I had no idea what he meant, but I went anyway, tracing Liam's trail of anger and frustration past the restrooms, past the abandoned sitting area, to the other side of the building, where there was wild long grass, trees, and absolutely no way he could have seen him from Betty. He stood, with his back toward me, sagging against the rest stop's wall, arms crossed over his chest, hair standing on end. I thought I was being quiet like a fox, but he knew the moment I stepped behind him. His grief hung around us like humidity seeping into my skin. I felt invisible at the back of my mind, wakened, howling like a feral cat that'd been caged too long. I kept my distance. "Lee?" "I'm okay. Go back to the van," again with the forced bright voice. He dropped to a crouch, then completely to the ground, but I didn't move, not until he leaned forward and stuck his head between his knees, looking like he was about to throw up everything in his stomach. I stared long and hard at the place where his light hair curled against his neck, at the exact spot an old bruise disappeared down his shirt collar. My hand lifted at my side to push the soft fabric away. I wanted to see how far the ugly mark extended, to see what other wounds he was hiding. "You touched him before," a little voice whispered in the back of my mind, "and nothing happened then." Instead, I took a step back and away, so I was no longer standing directly behind him, but off to the side. Distance. Distance was good. "You're right, he said quietly. "I don't want to find the slipgit just to deliver Jack's letter. I don't even want to use him to help me find my family. I know where they are and how to reach them, but I can't go home, not yet." Somewhere behind us, I heard one of Betty's doors slide open, but I didn't break the stillness of the moment. "Why not? I'm sure your parents miss you." Liam rested his arms over his knees, his back still to me. "Did Chubbs tell you? Did he say anything to you about me and the League?" He couldn't see it, but I still shook my head. Harry, my stepdad, he knew from the start that the Children's League was bad news. Said they would use us worse than Gray ever would. And wouldn't shed one damn tear if we died helping them, even after Claire was my sister, my little sister. He cleared his throat. Even after she was gone, he used to remind me that no amount of fighting was ever going to bring her back. Cole had already joined up with them, and he came back to get me to go with him to fight. Was my sister, was gone. Another victim of Ian. I brought into it. I was so angry. I hated everyone and everything, but there wasn't anyone to direct it at. I was there with them for weeks, training, letting them turn me into this weapon, into some kind of person that would take an innocent person's life just because it served their needs and what they wanted. My brother was like a stranger. He even kept this thing he called a kill chart in our room, and he'd add to it every time he killed someone important, every time he completed a mission. And I would come in after training all day and I'd look at it and think, how many of those people had families? And how many of those people had people who needed them just like we needed Claire? And that's just it. They all did. Ruby, I'm sure of it. People don't live like islands. So you got out. He nodded. Had to run during a training simulation outside. I was trying to get back with Harry and Mom when the PSFs picked me up. He finally turned so he was looking at me. I can't go back to them yet. Not until I earn it. Not until I make it right. What are you talking about? While I was with the League, I realized that the only people that were ever going to help us were ourselves. So I figured out a way to break out of Caledonia. Liam's voice trailed off, and then he said, it was horrible. Horrible. I totally failed them, even after I promised it would work out in the end. So why? His voice caught. You heard what the newscaster said. Only a few of us got caught, so they just kept picking us off like rabbits in hunting season. So why do I want to do it again? Why can't I shake it? All I want is to help more kids break out of Caledonia, out of Thurmond, out of every single camp, one by one. Oh, I thought, feeling vaguely numb. Oh, I had only ever wanted to find the slip kid to help myself. I figured out how to tame my abilities, but all along, Liam had wanted to find them because he was sure he'd be able to help others. That, together, they could find a way to save the kids we'd all been forced to leave behind. It's just so unfair, you know? All these all this morning, I kept thinking, it's so goddamn unfair that I'm here, so close to finding the East River, and the rest of them are gone. He pressed the back of his hand to his eyes. It makes me feel sick. I can't shake it. I can't. Those kids were talking about on the radio. I'm sure they were from Caledonia. He took in a ragged breath. Do you think they'd regret following me? Not for a second, I said. Listen to me. You didn't force them to follow you. You only gave them what the PSFs and the camp controllers took away from them, a choice. You can't live in a place like those camps and not know what the consequences might be. If those kids followed you out, it was because they chose to. They believed you when you said we'd all get home someday. Most of them didn't. Liam shook his head. In some ways, it would have been safer for them to stay in the camps, right? They wouldn't have been hunted. They wouldn't have had to see how afraid everyone is of them, or felt like they didn't have a place out here. But isn't it better to give them that choice? I asked. Is it? My head was pounding and my shoulders ached. By the time I finally thought of something to say, Liam was climbing up to his knees. What are you still doing here? Not upset or angry, not anymore. Watching your back. He shook his head, a sad smile on his face. You've got better things to worry about. I'm really sorry, the words tumbled out of me in a rush. I shouldn't have opened his letter. It's none of my business. I wasn't thinking. No, no. I'm the one that's sorry. I didn't mean to blow up on you. God, it was like Dad was talking through me. I'm so, so sorry. Liam looked down, and when he looked back at me, his lips were pressed tight together. I thought he might cry or scream, and felt myself sway forward at the same time he took another dangerous step toward me. It made me feel boneless to meet his gaze straight on, but I wanted the truth from him, even as I worried about the intensity of his gaze would burn me. Come on, let's go back. He shook his head. I'm fine. I shouldn't have left those two alone again. I think you need another minute, I said. And I think you should take it, because when you get back in that car, you'll have people depending on you. He tried to reach for my arm, but I took a step back. I don't know what he began. God, I wanted to take his hand when he offered it. Mine were frozen, needled with pain. Here, I motioned between us. This is a place you don't need to lie. I meant what I said before, but I can't help you if you don't tell me what's really going on inside your head. If you need to talk or vent or scream, do it with me. Just don't just get up and go like that again. like you always do. I know you think you're protecting us, but Lee, what happens if one of these days you go off and don't come back? He took a step toward me, his eyes darkening with something I didn't recognize. It never occurred to me how tall he was, but he seemed to tower over me then, leaning down until our faces were level with each other. I could see what I would have done if our situations had been different. If I had control of myself, I could see what he wanted, what I wanted. My foot slipped against a rock as I stepped away, my back scraping against the wall, my head sending me in a spiraling into panic. It was trilling in anticipation, relishing how close he was. Maybe his anger had evaporated, but whatever he was feeling now was stronger than before, stronger than pain or frustration or fury. The words, "Get away from me," and "Don't," were stuck tight in my chest, wedged between terror and want. Liam's lips formed my name, but there was nothing outside of the blood rushing in my ears. I tried one last time to wrench myself away, but my knees, the traitors, buckled under me. Spots in every shade of rainbow popped and burst in front of my eyes. And that's when he grabbed me, only this time it was to hold me up, not pull me to him. It didn't matter. The moment his hand circled my waist, he was gone. Chapter 18. My eyes were shut, but I could imagine what must have happened, how his pupils must have shrunk, then dilated, open and vulnerable, waiting for a command. Liam's mind was a blur of colors and lights. One moment I was standing next to a young blond boy in overalls, clutching a woman's hand. Then I was balancing on the front bumper of an old car as gentle-faced man with the strong arms pointed out the engine. I saw the face of a kid rocket back as I punched him in the nose, heard a roar of approval from a circle of boys formed around us. I stared at Chubbs's long legs as they hung over the edge of the top bunk, and then I was standing in front of Black Betty, watching Zoo climb into the back seat, looking frail and hungry. And then I was seeing me. I was seeing me with the light reflecting off my dark hair, laughing my fool head off in the passenger seat. I didn't know I could look like that. No, 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 I don't want to see. I slapped him across the face. The sound echoed up through the tree branches. Pain flared in my hand, spreading quickly up my arm to the center of my chest. I heard something else, too. A snap, like a dried out wishbone being pulled apart. I reeled back as if he had been the one to hit me. I almost wish he had, because the pain would have distracted me from the dizzy disorientation that came next. I panicked. I knew from countless experiences at Thurman that the best way to break a connection was to do it slowly, carefully. Unravel the invisible threads linking us together one by one. I, wasn't this exactly what had happened with Sam? One wrong touch and I had pulled back so hard and so fast at her mind that I ripped away every single trace of me? Wasn't it? Wasn't it? The pain lessened the further I dragged myself away from him. Ruby? Why did I always have to do this? Why couldn't I just hold it together for once? Liam was staring at me, not through me. He looked focused, if not completely bewildered. His eyes fell on the red welt forming on his cheek. Had I heard that right? My name? What the hell just happened? He let out a strangled laugh. I feel like I just got hit by a linebacker. I slipped. What could I possibly say? The truth was on the tip of my tongue, dangling there, but if he knew what I had just done to him. And there I was, trying to be all valiant and stuff by catching you? He chuckled, using the closest tree to help him stand. Lesson learned. You're falling next time, darling, because man, you have a hard head. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so, so sorry. Liam stopped laughing. Green, you know I'm just kidding, right? Really, it takes a special kind of guy to get knocked out by the same person he's trying to catch. Aside from bringing back a few humiliating memories of school sports, I'm fine, honestly. What? Do you even remember what we were talking about? Oh my god, he said, all of a sudden noticing I was on the ground. Are you okay? I can't believe I didn't even ask. Are you hurt? I avoided the hand he offered. It was too soon. I'm fine, I said. I think we should head back now. You left Betty running. My voice sounded calm, but inwardly I was such a desert. All of the hoping that had sprung there, growing and spreading and yielding like a stream, had dried up in an instant. I had slipped up, but he didn't know. They never did. This couldn't happen again. I was lucky this time. He still remembered me, even if he couldn't recall what I had done. But there was no guaranteeing that luck would hold. No more touching. No more fingers brushing against arms, or shoulders pressed against shoulders. No more taking his hand, no matter how warm or big it was. That alone was the reason to find the slip kid, to beg him to help me. Yeah, yeah, he nodded, but I didn't miss the way his brows furrowed when he looked my way again. with a grinding ache in my chest when he passed by and didn't let his hand reach for mine. I stayed 5 steps in front of him as we made our way back around the rest stop, past the water fountains, through the silver benches and tables under the overhang. I moved faster, practically jogging as I came around the corner, half expecting to see Chubbs and Zoo outside, trying to rig the vending machines into burping up whatever snacks they had left. But it wasn't Chubbs waiting for me there, and it certainly wasn't Zoo. Dark hair, darker eyes. A man that couldn't have been older than 25, with a scar that began just under his right eye, had raced to his hairline, where the shiny pink skin had prevented any hair from growing back. My brain processed his features one by one, in agonizing slowness. I watched as his face twisted, turning his narrow nose up in disgust. Liam called my name in a panic, his feet thundering against the cement. Run, I wanted to scream back to him. What are you doing? Run. I turned back to face the man, the skip tracer, in his wrinkled blue windbreaker, just in time to see the butt of his rifle flying down towards my face, knocking every thought clear out of my skull. Pain blinded me, flashing white beneath my eyelids, but I was down, not out. When the man tried to hold me up by the front of my shirt, I swung a leg around and caught him by the ankles. He landed on the ground with a grunt. His gun clattered against a nearby patch of rocks. I kicked until I made contact with something solid, but I knew it wasn't enough. I tried to push myself up on my feet, but the world swung wild and loose under me. My head throbbed, and something hot and wet poured down my right eye. Blood. I could taste it then, just as plainly as I had felt the air move as Liam lifted the man clear off the ground with a wave of his hand. He threw him like a rag doll into the sharp edges of the picnic tables, knocking the skip tracer out in a single blow. Zoo, Chubbs, Zoo, Chubbs. My mind was stuck on a loop. I pressed a hand against my forehead, to the place where the gun had burst the skin in a jagged line. I don't know what happened next. It felt like my head was skipping seconds as we moved. At one point, I think Liam must have tried to help me up, but I pushed him away with clumsy, slow hands. Run, I tried to say. Get out of here. Ruby. Ruby. Liam was trying to get my attention because he hadn't seen what was up ahead. Zoo and Chubbs were sitting on the ground, outside of Betty. Their hands were handcuffs behind their backs, and their feet tied straight out in front of them with a length of bright yellow rope. Standing over them was none other than Lady Jane. This was the first time I had seen her up close enough, at least, that I could make out the beauty mark on her cheek and the sunken quality of her eyes behind the black frames of her glasses. Her hair was down around her shoulders and curling up with humidity, but her skin still looked as though it had been pulled taut over the sharp angles of her face. Her black shirt was tucked neatly into her jeans, and a black utility belt was there to keep them both in place. I recognized the countless devices hanging from the belt: the orange identifier, a taser, handcuffs. Hello, Liam Stewart, the woman said, her accent cold and silky. Next to me, Liam braced his feet and threw his arms up, to knock her back, I think. The woman only tissed, nodding ahead towards her outstretched left arm. My eyes followed its angle downward to the gun pointed at Zoo's head. Lee, Chubb's voice was unnaturally high, but it was the look in Zoo's eyes that planted me in place. Come here, the woman said, slowly, with your hands on top of your head. Now, Liam. Otherwise, I can't be sure that my finger won't slip. She cocked her head to the side. Panic, I thought. The panic button. Where? My backpack was somewhere tucked under the front passenger seat. If I could get to it, if I could reach the door. Yeah? Liam spat. And what's the going rate for me these days? How much did it get cut back when you took you 3 weeks to finally catch up to us? Her smile faltered, but returned with far more teeth than before. You're still at a healthy $250,000, love. You should feel proud of that. You barely fetched me 10,000 the first time around. Liam was vibrating with rage, too choked up to speak. I heard his breath catch in his throat. I suddenly understood how he had known so much about her. This was the same woman who had captured him before. You can't imagine my surprise when your name popped back up in the bounty database. And with that kind of reward, it seems that you've gotten yourself in a fair bit of trouble since we last met. Yeah, well, Liam said, his voice was rough. I do my best. But darling, how could you be stupid enough to go back to that place? Didn't you think I'd look for you there? The woman tilted her head again. Your friends were only too willing to tell me where you were headed and why in exchange for letting them go. Lake Prince, is it? My pain gave way to fear again. If she finds East River? God, I couldn't imagine the consequences. Liam could, from the looks of it. His knuckles were white with the effort it took to keep his fingers clutched in his hair. What if I can pull in that Much for you. Imagine what I'll get for a whole camp full of kids, she said. Enough to finally buy my way home, I think. So thank you for that. You have no idea what kind of funds it takes to get an official to look the other way and admit someone from a disease-ridden country. The next second of silence past was deafening, only because I knew exactly what he would say next. If you let them all go, you can have me, he said, both his hands still on his head. I won't give you any trouble. No, Chubbs shouted. Don't. The woman didn't even need a moment to consider it. You think I'm going to do you any favors? No, Liam Stewart. I'm going to take all of you, even that girl of yours. Maybe you should consider her condition before you try to bargain? His eyes slid my way, taking in the blood streaking down my face. I tried to keep my vision straight as I took the tiniest step forward. I don't know where you came from, little girl, but I can assure you that where you're going won't be nearly as pleasant. I'm not going back. None of us were. Not if I could help it. Come here, she said, her eyes on me, but her gun still trained at Liam. You first, little girl. I'll take special care of you. I went one step at a time, ignoring Liam's sharp intake of breath and the buzzing in my ears. My eyes went from Chubbs to Zoo to the woman's all too pleased face. Everyone was watching me. Everyone will know. And no one would be willing to have me after that. Turn around, the woman barked. Her eyes flickered over to where her partner was still hidden behind a tangle of picnic tables. I saw her grip relax ever so slightly on her handgun, with her focus torn, and I took my chance. My knee flew up, nailing her just under the chest. The gun clattered to the ground, and I heard Liam take 2 running steps in my direction, but somehow I was faster. Blood was alive and warm on my face, dripping down my chin. The woman's eyes widened as my hand closed over her exposed throat. Slamming her back against Betty's door, when her gaze met mine, I knew I had her. The pain that exploded behind my eyes told me so. Slipping into her head was as easy as releasing a sigh. Seeing her pupils shrink and explode back out to the normal size, I felt as though someone had wrapped a line of barbed wire around my brain and was tightening it with every passing second. Chubbs's face appeared at the corner of my vision, eyes wide. When he tried to stand, I knocked him back down with my foot. No, it wasn't safe. Not yet. The woman looked around, her eyes wide and unfocused. That's when the pounding began in my ears. Da-da, da-da, da-da. I couldn't tell if it was my heart or hers. Hand him your gun, I said, tilting my head towards the place I knew Liam was standing. When she didn't move, I pushed the image of her doing it through the bubbling black shapes of her mind. I couldn't bring myself to look at his reaction as the black weapon was placed in his outstretched hand. Listen to me very carefully, I said. The blood was bitter in my mouth. You are going to turn and walk back across the highway. You are going to walk into that forest and keep walking until an hour passes, and you are going to sit down in the middle of it and not move. You're not going to eat or sleep or drink, no matter how much you want to. You're not going to move. Imagine that into her mind, pushing the thought of her doing exactly that. She was becoming more difficult, not because my grip on her was slipping, but because my grip on consciousness was. You can do this, I told myself. It didn't matter that no one had ever taught me, or that I had never practiced. In the end, it was all instinct, like I had known all along. I closed my eyes and went to work, sorting through the darkened memories bubbling up behind her eyes. I found myself driving down the highway, one hand on the wheel, the other pointing to that red stop ahead of us. I parked the car a ways back, half hidden by the trees, and began to walk toward the lone black van in the parking lot. I stayed with this memory, taking the scent of rain and grass, feeling the light breeze, until her partner reached the van, his rifle up and ready to fire. I forced the memory out of her mind, imagining nothing but air where Black Betty had been in the parking lot. I traced the line of memories back to the boys at Walmart, to the secret they had revealed about the East River, the images slipping away in smears of light, like raindrops racing down a car. Now, you won't remember any of this, or any of us. I won't remember any of this, she parroted, as though the thought had just occurred to her. I let go of her neck, but my pain didn't go away. Her eyes regained some focus. The pain didn't go away. She turned sharply on her heel and started to make her way towards the deserted highway. The pain didn't go away. No, it got worse. The trickle of sweat began at my temple and worked its way down the length of my spine. I was drenched. My hair clung to my face. My shirt was a second skin. I dropped into a crouch. If I was going to faint, I better stay close to the ground. God, I don't want to faint. Don't faint. Do not faint. I heard Liam say something. His foot came into my line of sight, and I leaned away. Don't, I began. Don't touch me. Not right now. And it was strange, because the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes wasn't the old asphalt. It wasn't the sky, or even my reflection in Betty's panels. It was a glimmering memory of my own, of a few days ago when Liam had been in the driver's seat singing along to Derek and the Dominoes' Layla at the top of his lungs, so off key that it even had Chubbs laughing. Sue had been sitting right behind him, moving in time with the music, her entire body rocking out of the wailing electric guitar. But it had been so easy then to laugh and pretend, even if just for a second we thought that we would be okay, that I belonged with them, because they hadn't known, none of them had known. And now they did. It was over. And it was all over now, and I would never have that back. I wish I had gone for the panic button. I wish that Kate could have come and taken me away from them, back to the only people who would ever embrace me for the monster I was. Chapter 19. When I was about to turn 10 years old, the most significant thing about that number was that it was double digits. It didn't feel much like a birthday anyway. At dinner, I sat bookended by my parents at the table, moving peas around my plate, trying to ignore the fact that neither of them were speaking to each other or to me. Mom's eyes were rimmed with red and glassy because of the argument they'd had a half hour before. She was still vaguely trying to gather up kids for a surprise birthday party for me, but Dad forced her to call and cancel. Said it wasn't the kind of year to be celebrating, and as the last kid alive on my block, it would be cruel of us to hang the birthday banner and tie up the usual cluster of balloons outside. I heard the whole thing from the top of the stairs. I didn't really care about the birthday either way. It wasn't like I had anyone left I really wanted to invite. What was more important to me was the fact that at 10, I was suddenly old, or rather, would be old soon. I started to look like the girls in the magazines, be forced to wear dresses and high heels and makeup, go to high school. In 10 years from tomorrow, I'll be 20. I don't know why I said it out loud. It was just this profound realization that it had to be shared. The silence that followed was actually painful. Mom sat up straight and pressed her napkin to her mouth. For a moment, I thought she might stand up and leave, but Dad's hand came down to rest on top of hers, settling like an anchor. Dad finished chewing on his barbecued chicken before giving me a smile that quivered at the edges. He leaned down a ways so our identical green eyes met. That's right, little bee. And how old will you be in 10 years after that? 30, I said, and you'll be 52. He chuckled. That's right. Halfway to the grave, my mind whispered. Halfway to the grave. Dad realized his mistake before the words fully left his mouth, but it didn't matter. All three of us knew what he meant. Grave. I knew what death was. I knew what happened after you died. At school, they brought in special visitors to talk to the kids that had come back. The one assigned to our room, Miss Finch, gave her presentation 2 weeks before Christmas, wearing a bright pink turtleneck and glasses that covered half her face. She wrote everything out on a whiteboard in thick capital letters. Death is not sleeping. It happens to everyone. It could happen at any time. You do not come back. When people die, she explained, they stop breathing. They do not have to eat, they no longer speak, and they cannot think or miss us like we miss them. They do not ever, ever wake up. She kept giving us more examples, like we were too stupid or little to understand. Like the six of us left hadn't sat there and watched Grace's lights go out. Dead cats cannot purr, dead dogs cannot play, dead flowers, Miss Finch pointed out to the bundle of dried flowers on my teacher's desk, do not grow or bloom any more. Hours of this. Hours of being asked, do you understand? But for all of her answers, she never got around to the one question I'd wanted to ask. What does it feel like? Dad looked up sharply. What does what feel like? I looked down at my plate. To die. Do you feel it? I know that it's not the same for everyone, and that you stop breathing and your heart stops beating, but what does that feel like? Ruby! I could hear the horror in my mom's voice. It's okay if it hurts, I said, but are you still in your body after things stop working? Do you know if you've died? Ruby! Dad's bushy eyebrows drew together as his shoulders slumped. Well, don't you dare, Mom said, using her free hand to try to pry his big one off of her trembling fingers. Jacob, don't you dare. I kept my hands clenched together under the table, trying not to stare at Mom's face as it paled from the deep red to a stark white. No one, Dad began. No one knows, sweetheart. I can't give you the answer. Everyone finds out when it's their time. I guess it probably depends. Stop it, Mom said, slapping her other hand down on the table. Our plates jumped in time with her palm. Ruby, go to your room. Calm down, Dad told her in a stern voice. This is important to talk about. It is not. It is absolutely not. How dare you? First you canceled the party, and when I told you, She strained against his grip, watching my lips parting as she picked up her water glass and threw it at his head. In ducking, he lifted his hand from the table, just enough for her to wrench away and stand. Her chair clattered to the ground a second after the glass shattered against the wall behind Dad's head. I screamed. I didn't mean to, but it slipped out. Mom came around to my side of the table and grabbed me by the elbow, hauling me up, nearly taking the tablecloth with me. "Cut it out," I heard Dad say. "Stop, we have to talk to her about it. The doctor said we needed to prepare her." "You're hurting me," I managed to choke out. Mom startled at the sound of my voice, looking down at where her nails were digging into my soft skin on my upper arm. "Oh my God," she said. But I was already in the hallway, flying up the stairs and slamming my bedroom door shut and locking it behind me, closing out the sound of my parents screaming at each other. I dove under my heavy purple bed covers, knocking the row of carefully arranged stuffed animals to the ground. I didn't bother to change out of the clothes I had worn to school or turned off the lights, not until I was sure my parents were still in the kitchen and far away from me. An hour later, breathing the same hot air under the comforter in and out, I listened to the rattle of the air vent, though I thought about the other significant thing about turning 10. Grace had been 10. So had Frankie and Peter and Mario and Ramona. So had half my class. The half that never came back after Christmas. 10 is the most common age for Ian to manifest, I had overheard a newscaster saying, but the affliction can claim anyone between the ages of 8 and 14. I straightened my legs out and pressed my arms into my sides. I held my breath and shut my eyes, staying as still as possible. Dead. Miss Finch had described it like a series of stops and knots. Stopped breathing, not moving, stopped heart, not sleeping. It seemed like it should have been that simple. When a loved one dies, they don't get to wake up, she had said. There are no comebacks or no do-overs. You may wish could come back, but it's important that you understand they can't and they won't. A tear slipped down the side of my face, dripping into my ears and my hair. I turned to the side, smashing a pillow over my face, trying to block out the screaming match downstairs. Were they coming up to my room to yell at me? Once or twice I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, but then Dad's voice would float up to me, booming and terrible, yelling words that I didn't like or understand. Mom sounded like she was being gutted. I drew my legs up to my chest and pressed my face against my knees. For every 2 breaths I was taking in, I was lucky to get one out. Inside my chest, my heart had been racing for what felt like hours, jumping with every shatter or thud from downstairs. I stuck my head over the covers just once to make sure I had locked the door. That wouldn't make them even angrier if they tried it, but I didn't care. My head felt light and heavy all at once, but worst of all was the pounding, the dum-dum-dum in the back of my head, like someone was trying to knock against my skull, trying to break out. "Stop it," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut against the pain. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't keep them over my ears. "Please, please stop." Hours later, when my feet carried me downstairs, I found them in the dark bedroom, deep in sleep. I stood in the silver of light coming through the open doorway, waiting to see if they would wake up. I had half a mind to climb into bed with them like I used to do, in the small space between them that I knew was warm and safe. But Dad had told me I was too big to be doing such silly things. So instead, I walked over to Mom's side of the bed and kissed her goodnight. Her cheek was slick with rosemary-scented cream, cool and smooth to the touch. The instant I pressed my lips there, I jumped back, a flash of white burning inside my eyelids. For one strange second, the image of my own face has leaped to the front of a long series of jumbled thoughts, then disappeared like a photo drifting into dark water. Her blanket must have shocked me. The jolt traveled all the way up to my brain, flashing it white for a second. She must not have felt it, because she didn't wake up. Neither did Dad, even when the same strange thing happened. As I made my way back upstairs, the tightness in my chest vanished, lifting away from the comforter as I kicked it to the floor. The head-splitting pain released its grip on my brain, leaving me feeling empty like a tank had run empty. I had to close my eyes to block out the side of my room swaying in the darkness. And then in the morning, my alarm went off at 7 exactly, switching over to the radio just as Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was starting. I remember sitting straight up in bed, more surprised than anything. I touched my face, my chest. The room seemed unnaturally bright for so early in the morning, despite the curtains being closed, and with only a few minutes, the headache had crept back in, claws out. I rolled out of bed and onto the floor, my stomach turning with me. I waited until the dark spots had stopped floating in my eyes and tried to swallow to ease my dry throat. I knew this feeling. I knew what the clenching in my gut meant. Sick. I was sick on my birthday. I stumbled out of bed, changing into my Batman PJs on the way out the door. Mom would be even angry with me if she knew I had slept in my nice button-down shirt. It was wrinkled and drenched in sweat. But despite the cold clinging to my bedroom window, maybe she'd feel bad about the night before and let me stay home to show how sorry she was. I wasn't even halfway down the stairs when I saw the wreckage in the living room. From the landing, it looked like a pack of animals had gotten in and had a field day throwing around pillows, overturning the armchair, and smashing every single glass candle holder that had been on the now cracked coffee table. Every picture on the fireplace mantel was face down on the ground, as were the line of school portraits my mom had placed on the table behind the couch. And then there were the books, dozens of them. My mom had completely emptied out every book in the library in her anger. They littered the ground like rainbow candy. But as scary as that room was, I didn't feel like throwing up until I reached the last step and smelled bacon, not pancakes. We didn't have many traditions as a family, but chocolate chip pancakes on birthdays were one of them, and the one we were least likely to forget. For the past 3 years, they'd forgotten to leave out milk and cookies for Santa, somehow forgotten their pact that we would go camping every 4th of July weekend, and even, on occasion, forgot to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But forgetting the birthday pancakes? Or maybe she was just mad at me to not make them. Maybe she hated me after what I had said last night. Mom had her back to me when I walked into the kitchen and shielded my eyes from the sunlight streaming down the window above her sink. Her dark hair was pulled back into a low, messy bun, resting against the collar of her red robe. I had a matching one that Dad had bought them for Christmas the month before. Ruby red for my Ruby, he had said. She was humming under her breath, one hand flipping the bacon on the stove, the other holding a newspaper. Whatever song was stuck in her head was upbeat, chipper, and for a moment I really did think the stars had aligned for me. She was over last night. She was going to let me stay home. After months of being angry and upset over the tiniest things, she was finally happy again. Mom? Then again louder. Mom? She turned around so quickly she knocked the pan off the stove and nearly dropped the gray paper into the open flame there. I saw her reach back and slap her hand against the knobs, twisting the dial until the smell of gas disappeared. I don't feel good. Can I stay home today? No response, not even a blink. Her jaw was working, grinding, but it took me walking over to the table and sitting down for her to find her voice. How how did you get in here? I have a bad headache and my stomach hurts, I told her, putting my elbows up on the table. I knew she hated it when I whined, but I didn't think she hated it enough to come over and grab me by the arm again. I asked you how you got in here, young lady. What's your name? Her voice sounded strange. Where do you live? Her grip on my skin only tightened the longer I waited to answer. It must have been a joke, right? She was sick too? Sometimes cold medicine did funny things to her. Funny things, though, not scary things. Can you tell me your name? She repeated. Ouch! I yelped, trying to pull my arm away. Mom, what's wrong? She yanked me up from the table, forcing me onto my feet. Where are your parents? How did you get in this house? Something tightened in my chest to the point of snapping. Mom, Mommy, why? Stop it, she hissed. Stop calling me that. What are you? I think I must have tried to say something else, but she dragged me over to the door that led into the garage. My feet slid against the wood, skin burning. What's wrong with you? I cried. I twisting out of her grasp, but she wouldn't even look at me. Not until we were at the door of the garage and she pushed my back up against it. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I know you're confused, but I promise that I'm not your mother. I don't know how you got into this house, and frankly, I'm not sure I want to know. I live here, I told her. I live here. I'm Ruby. When she looked at me again, I saw none of the things that made my mom my mother. The lines that formed around her eyes when she smiled were smoothed out. Her jaw was clenched around whatever she wanted to say next. When she looked at me, she didn't see me. I wasn't invisible, but I wasn't Ruby. Mom, I started to cry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be bad. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, I promise. I'll be good. I'll go to school today. I won't be sick, and I'll pick up my room. I'm sorry. Please remember. Please. She put one hand on my shoulder and the other on the door handle. My husband is a police officer. He'll be able to help you get home. Wait in here and don't touch anything. The door opened and I was pushed into a wall, a freezing January air. I stumbled down onto the dirty, oil-stained concrete, just managing to catch myself before I slammed into the side of her car. I heard the door shut behind me and the lock click into place. Heard her call Dad's name as clearly as I heard the birds flying in the bushes outside in the dark garage. She hadn't even turned on the light for me. I pushed myself up on my hands and knees, ignoring the bite of the frosty air on my bare skin. I launched myself in the direction of the door, fumbling around until I found it. I tried shaking the handle, jiggling it, still thinking, hoping, praying that this was some big birthday surprise, and that by the time I got back inside, there would be a plate of pancakes at the table, and Dad would bring in the presents, and we could pretend like this night before never happened, even with the evidence in the room next over. The door was locked. I'm sorry, I was screaming, pounding my fists against it. Mommy, I'm sorry, please. Dad appeared a moment later, his stocky shape outlined by the light from inside of the house. I saw Mom's bright red face over his shoulder. He turned to wave her off and then reached over to flip on the overhead lights. Dad, I said, throwing my arms around his waist. He let me keep them there, but all I got in return was a light pat on the back. You're safe, he told me, in an unusual, soft, rumbling voice. Dad, there's something wrong with her, I was babbling. The tears were burning my cheeks. I didn't mean to be bad. You have to fix her, okay? She's. I know. I believe you. At that, he carefully peeled my arms off his uniform and guided me down so we were sitting on the step, facing Mom's maroon sedan. He was fumbling in his pockets for something, listening to me as I told him everything that had happened since I walked into the kitchen. He pulled out a small pad of paper from his pocket. Daddy, I tried again, but he cut me off, putting down an arm between us. I understand. No touching. I had seen him do something like this before on Take Your Child to Work Day at the station. The way he spoke, the way he wouldn't let me touch him. I had watched him treat the other kids this way, only that one had a black eye and broken nose. That kid had been a stranger. Any hope I had felt bubbling inside of me burst into 1,000 tiny pieces. Did your parents tell you where you'd been bad? He asked, when he could get a word in. Did you leave your house because you were afraid they would hurt you? I pushed myself up off the ground. This is my house, I wanted to scream. You are my parents. My throat felt like it had closed in on itself. You can talk to me, he said very gently. I won't let anything hurt you. I just need your name, and then we can go down to the station and make some calls. I don't know what part of what he was saying finally broke me, but before I could stop myself, I had launched my fists against him, hitting him over and over again. Like that would drive some sense back into him. I am your kid, I screamed. I'm Ruby. You've got to calm down, Ruby, he told me, catching my wrists. It'll be okay. I'll call ahead to the station and then we'll go. No, I shrieked. No. He pulled me off him again and stood, making his way to the door. My nails caught the back of his hand and I heard him grunt in pain. He didn't look back around as he shut the door. I stood alone in the garage, less than 10 feet away from my blue bike, from the tent that we used to camp a dozen times. From the sled I almost broke my arm on. All around the garage and house were pieces of me, but Mom and Dad, they couldn't put them together. They couldn't see the completed puzzle standing in front of them. But eventually they must have seen the pictures of me in the living room or gone up to my mess of a room. That's not my child, I could hear my mom yelling through the walls. She was talking to Grams. She had to be. Grams would set her straight. I have no child. She's not mine. I already called them. Don't. Stop it. I'm not crazy. I had to hide. I couldn't let them take me to the police station. I also couldn't dial 911 to get help. Maybe if I waited it out, they'd be better on their own? I dashed towards the storage tubs on the other side of the garage, squeezing past the front of Mom's car. One, maybe two more steps, I would have jumped inside the closest tub and buried myself under a pile of blankets. The garage door rolled open first. Not all the way, just enough so that I could see the snow on the driveway and the grass and the bottom half of a dark uniform. I squinted, holding a hand up to the blinding blanket of white light that seemed to settle over my vision. My head started pounding, 1,000 times worse than before. The man in the dark uniform knelt down in the snow, his eyes hidden by sunglasses. I hadn't seen him before, but I certainly hadn't met all the police officers at my dad's station. This one looked older, harder. I remember thinking, he waved me forward again, saying, "We're here to help you. Please come outside." I took a tentative step, then another. This man is a police officer, I told myself. Mom and Dad are sick, and they need help. His navy uniform looked darker the closer I got, like it was drenched straight through with rain. My parents, the officer didn't let me finish. Come out here, honey. You're safe now. It wasn't until my bare toes brushed up against the snow and the man had wrapped my long hair around his fist and yanked me through the opening that I even realized his uniform was black. When I finally came to in the gray light, I knew by the curve of the rear seat and the smell of fake lemon detergent that I was in the back in Betty. The van wasn't on and running, and the road wasn't passing underneath me, but the keys had been left in the ignition and the radio was on. Bob Dylan whispered the opening verse of Forever Young through the speakers. The song cut off abruptly, replacing by the DJ's flustered voice. Sorry about that, the man let out a nervous, breathy laugh. I don't know why the system brought that one up. It's on the no playlist. Uh, Back to the music. This one's a request from Bill out in Suffolk. Here's We Gotta Get Out of This Place by the Animals. I opened one eye and tried to sit up, with zero success. The throbbing in my head was so brutal that I had to clench my teeth to keep from getting sick all over myself. A good 5 minutes must have passed before I felt strong enough to reach up and touch the pain's epicenter on my right temple. My fingers brushed against the jagged raised surface of my skin, feeling each coarse stitch holding it together. Chubs. I pulled my right arm in front of me, flopped it around, useless and asleep, until the blood began to fill it again. Then it was fire and needles, but the pain was good. It roused the rest of me from its stubborn sleep. It didn't let me forget. I should go, I thought, now before they get back. The thought of seeing any of their faces made my chest feel like it was going to explode. They know. They know. I did start to cry then. I wasn't proud of it. But I knew I couldn't go through this again and come out of it in one piece. Footsteps sounded outside, saying it's too dangerous, Chubs. We need to consider getting rid of her. I don't want to talk about this right now. Liam sounded agitated. I used one of the seatbelts to pull me upright. The sliding door was open wide, giving me a perfect view of where Chubbs and Liam stood in the front of the small fire, which was ringed by a series of mismatched stones. The sky was dipping into night. When are we going to talk about it then? Chubbs said. Never? We're just going to pretend like it never happened? Zoo will be back soon. Good, Chubbs shouted. Good. This is her decision too. This is all of our decision, not just yours. Liam's face was red as I had ever seen it. What the hell are we supposed to do? Just dump her out here? Yes, I thought. That's exactly what you should do. And I had started to climb over the middle seats to tell them that much when Chubbs lurched forward, throwing Liam onto his back without touching him. Unfazed, Liam pressed his mouth into a tight line, raised his hand, and literally pulled the ground out from under his friend's feet. Chubbs hit the dirt with a sharp gasp, too stunned to do anything but lie there. Liam stayed on the ground too, pressing his fists against his eyes. Why are you doing this to us? Chubbs cried. Do you want to get caught? I know, Liam said. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. Why didn't you just tell me? Chubbs continued. Did you know this whole time? Why lie about it? Do you even want to get home or... Charles. His name cracked as it left my throat. I didn't think I sounded anything like myself, but the boys recognized my voice at once. Chubbs's face lost some of its heat as he turned to where I stood, clutching the minivan's sun-warmed frame. Liam pushed himself up off the ground. I'm gonna go, so you don't fight anymore, okay? I said. I'm sorry I lied to you. I know I should have left, but I wanted to help you get home because you had helped me, and I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. Ruby, Chubb said, then again louder. Ruby! Oh, for the love of... We were talking about Black Betty, not your orange ass. I froze. I thought... I understand why you would want to leave me behind. Huh? Liam looked horrified. We left the radio on in case you woke up, so you'd know we didn't leave you. God help me if that only made me cry harder. When a girl cries, a few things are more worthless than a boy. Having two of them just meant they stared at each other helplessly instead of at me. Chubbs and Liam stood, up to their ears and awkward, until Chubbs finally reached out and patted my head like he would have patted a dog. You thought that we wanted to get rid of you because you're not really green? Liam sounded like he was having a hard time wrapping his head around that. I mean, I'm not thrilled you didn't trust us enough to tell us the truth, but that was your secret. I trust you, I do, I said, but I didn't want you to think that I had to force my way in or manipulate you. I didn't want you to be afraid of me. Okay, first, Liam said, why would we think that you had pulled a Jedi mind trick on us to let you stay? We voted. We asked you. Second, what in the name of God's green earth is wrong with being an orange? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Exactly, Chubbs cut in. We have no idea, but it's not like we're going to win any awards for normalcy anytime soon. So you get into people's heads. The two of us can throw people around like toys. Zoo once blew up an AC unit, and all she did was walk by it. It wasn't the same, and they didn't understand. I can't always control it like you can, I said. And sometimes I do things, bad things. I see things that I shouldn't. I turn people into things they aren't. It's horrible. And when I'm in someone's head, it's like quicksand. The more I try to pull free, the more damage I do. Chubb started to say something, only to stop. Liam leaned down so his face was level with mine, so close that our foreheads were nearly touching. "We want you," he said. His hand slipped through my hair to cup the back of my neck. "We wanted you yesterday, we want you today, and we'll want you tomorrow. There's nothing you could do to change that. If you're scared and you don't understand your crazy abilities, then we'll help you understand. But don't think, not for 1 second, that we would ever just leave you." He waited until I was looking him in the eye before continuing. "Is this why you acted that way when I said the slip kid might be an orange? Is that really why you want to find him, or do you just want to go to your grandmother's? Because either way, darling, we'll get you there." "Both," I said. Was it so wrong to want both? I had stopped crying, but my lungs felt sticky, heavy, and getting in even an ounce of air was too much effort. I didn't know why my brain was as still as it was, but I was trying not to think about it. Liam and Chubbs both took an arm. I was lifted out of the van, guided over to the crackling fire. "Where are we?" I finally asked. "Somewhere between North Carolina and the Great Dismal Swamp, I hope," Liam said, his hand still on my back, now rubbing circles there. "Southeast Virginia. Now that you're awake, I need you to check on Zoo. You stay. I need to check on Zoo. You two stay put, okay?" Chubbs nodded, and we watched Liam go in. Silence. Then Chubbs turned to me. "Ruby," he began, his voice perfectly serious, "can you tell me who the president is?" I blinked. "Can you tell me why you're asking this question? Do you remember what happened?" Did I? The memory was milky and distorted, like I was glimpsing into someone else's dream. "Angry man," I said. "Rifle, Ruby's head. Ouch." "Cut it out, I'm being serious." I winced, touching the stitching in my forehead. "Can you keep your voice down? It feels like my head is about to cave in." "Yeah, well, serves you right for scaring the hell out of all of us here. Here, keep drinking this," he said, handing me what was left of our water bottle. It didn't matter that the water was stale or warm. I finished it off in one gulp. "I mean, my dad used to say that head wounds look worse than they actually are, but I legitimately thought you were a corpse." "Thanks for sticking up for me," I said. "I'm looking a little Frankenstein, but I guess it's appropriate, all things considered." Chubbs gave a weary sigh. "Frankenstein is the name of the doctor that created the monster, not the monster itself. Couldn't let that one go, could you?" "Don't get on my case about it. You're the one who doesn't know her classic literature." "Funny. I don't know they have that one in Thurman's library." I hadn't meant for it to come out as sharply as it did, but it wasn't a pleasant experience being reminded that your education level equaled that of a 10-year-old. He had the decency to look apologetic as he let out a deep sigh. "It's just, take it easy, will you? My heart can only take so much stress." All along, while listening to Chubbs and Liam try to talk me down, some part of me had been trying to work through the argument I had overheard. I could understand, as horrifying as it was, the need to leave Betty behind. The PSFs and skip tracers all seemed to know what to look for her now. There had been something else underlying their words, something else that had them at odds. I had a feeling I knew exactly what it was, but I couldn't ask Liam. I wanted the truth, not a sugar-coated version of it, the team reality take. Only Chubbs could get back to me. But I hesitated, because next to his feet, on the ground between us, was Chubbs's copy of Watership Down. I kept thinking about this one line, the one line that made me so angry the first time I read it as a kid. "Rabbits need dignity, and above all, the will to accept their fate." In this book, the rabbits had come across this warren, this community that accepted food, handouts from humans in exchange for accepting that some of them would be killed by the same humans in return. Those rabbits stopped fighting the system because it was easier to take the loss of freedom, to forget what it was like before the fence kept them in, than to be out there in the world, struggling to find shelter and food. They had decided that the loss of some was worth the temporary discomfort of many. "Will it always be this way?" I asked, drawing my knees up to my chest and pressing my face against them. "Even if we find East River and we get help, there's always going to be a Lady Jane around the corner, isn't there? Will it even be worth it?" The will to accept their fate. In our case, that fate was never to see our families again, to always be hunted and chased down to every dark pocket of earth we tried to hide inside. Something we had to give. We couldn't live that way. We weren't made to. I felt him drop a heavy palm on the back of my head, but it was a long time before he could piece together his thoughts. "Maybe nothing will ever change for us," he said, "but don't you want to be around just in case it does?" I don't know if it was the smoke from the campfire that calmed me, or the sudden reappearance of Zoo, who had come back from scouting a nearby campsite, making sure it was deserted. As she wrapped her arms around my waist, the boys began to pull together what was left of our food and Betty. So that's how you figured out the clue, Liam said. You saw a memory of it? I nodded. Not so impressive now, is it? No, no, that's not what I meant. He added quickly. I'm just trying to imagine what the inside of that kid's head looked like. And the best I can come up with is swamp filled with alligators. It must have been terrible. Not as terrible as slipping into someone's head I actually like, I admitted. Did you? Chubb said, after nearly 10 minutes of silence. Liam was busy testing out whether he could use Betty's car key to pry open a lid of the fruit and soup cans. Did I what? Did you ever get inside our heads? He finished. The way he asked reminded me of the way a kid would ask for the end of a bedtime story. Eager, surprising. In all my nightmares about them finding out the truth, I had pictured Chubbs taking it the worst. Of course she's in our heads, Liam said, his arms straining to open the can's lid. Ruby is one of us now. That's not what I meant, Chubbs huffed. I just wanted to know how it works. I've never met an orange before. We didn't have any in Caledonia. That's probably because the government erased them all, I said, dropping my hands in my lap. That's what happened to them in Thurmond. Liam looked up, alarmed. What do you mean? For the first 2 or 3 years, I thought we had every kind of color, even red and orange, I said. But no one really knows why or how it happened. Some people thought they were taken away because of all the trouble they caused. But there were rumors that they were being moved to a new camp where they could do more testing on them. We just woke up one morning and the reds, oranges, and yellows were gone. And it was just as terrifying for me to think about now as it was then. What about you, though? How did you avoid getting bussed? I pretended to be a green from the start, I said. I saw how scared the PSFs were of oranges, and I messed with the scientist who was running the classifying test. It was a struggle to push the rest of the words out. Those kids they were so messed up, you know? Maybe they were like that before they got their abilities, or they hated themselves for having them. But they used to do terrible things. Like what? Chubbs pressed. Oh God, I couldn't even talk about it. I physically could not speak. Not about the hundreds of mind games I watched them play on the PSFs, nothing about the memory of having to scrub the floors of the mess hall after an orange told a PSF to walk in and open fire on every soldier he saw there. My stomach turned violently, and I could taste it, the metallic bitterness of blood, smell it. I remember how it felt to scrape it out from where it was packed painfully under my nails. Chubbs opened his mouth, but Liam held up a hand to shut him up. I just knew I needed to protect myself. And truthfully, because I was scared of the oranges too. There was something wrong with them, with us. It was constant chatter, the flood of everyone else's feelings and thoughts, I think. Eventually you learn how to block some of it out, to build up a thin wall between your mind and others, but not before everyone else's poisonous thoughts were in there, straining your own. Some spent so long outside of their own heads that they couldn't function right when they finally had to return to their own. So now you see, I said, finally, what a mistake it was to let me stay. Zoo was shaking her head, looking distraught at the suggestion. Chubbs raised his eyes, hiding his expression. Only Liam was willing to look me straight in the eyes. And there was no disgust or fear or any of the thousand of ugly emotions he was entitled to, only understanding. Try to imagine where we'd be without you, darlin', he said quietly, and then maybe you'll see just how lucky we got. Chapter 20. That night, we slept in the van, each sprawled out on a seat. I let Zoo have the rear seat and stayed up front next to Liam. I felt uneasy in the silence and sleep didn't come easy, even when I called to it. Sometime around 5 in the morning, just as I was about to give into the fuzz covering my brain, I felt someone run a light finger down the back of my neck. I rolled over into my other side, and Liam was there, half awake. You were muttering to yourself, he whispered. You okay? I propped myself up on my elbow, wiping the sleep away from my eyes. The rain had condensed on the windows, covering the cracked windshield like a flimsy overlay of lace. Every time a fat raindrop dislodged itself and went streaking down the glass, it was like a tear in the fabric. Looking out into the forest was like searching someone's dreams, disorienting and unsettling, but inside the van, everything was sharp. The lines of the reclining seats, the dashboard knobs. I could even read the tiny printed brand name on the buttons of Liam's shirt. In that light, I could see every bruise and cut on his face, some just beginning to heal and others that had long since scarred. But what held my attention wasn't the bruise on his cheek, the same one I had given him a few days and lifetimes before, but the way his hair was standing almost straight, curling around his ear and against his neck. The storm had turned its color to a darker shade of honey, but it didn't lose any of its softness. It didn't make me want to reach out and touch it any less. "What?" he whispered. "What are you smiling about?" My fingers brushed down his hair, trying to smooth it down. I realized what I was doing a full minute after Liam had closed his eyes and leaned into my touch. Embarrassment flared up in my chest, but he grabbed my hand before I could pull back and tucked it under his chin. "Nope," he whispered when I tried to tuck it away. "Mine now." Dangerous. This is dangerous. The warning was fleeting, vanished to the back corners of my mind where it wouldn't interrupt how good it felt to touch him. How right. "I'm going to need it back eventually," I said, letting him run it along the stubble on his chin. "Too bad." "Crackers," a voice behind us breathed. "Yes." Both of us turned, watching as Chubbs twisted around in his seat and settled back down, still fast asleep. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from laughing. Liam rolled his eyes, smiling. "He dreams about food," he said. "A lot." "At least they're good dreams." "Yeah," Liam agreed. "I guess he's lucky." I looked back at Chubb's curled form, and for the first time realized just how cold it was without the heat from Betty's vent. Liam let his head slide down to rest against his other arm, threading his fingers through mine. He seemed to be studying the shape they made, the way my thumb appeared to rest naturally on top of his. "If you want to," he began. "Could you see what he was dreaming about?" I nodded, but those things are private. "But you've done it before?" "Not intentionally." "To me?" "To the other girls in my cabin at camp," I said. "To Zoo that night in the motel. I've been in your head once, just not in your dreams." "2 days ago," he said, putting it together, at the rest stop. It was instinct to pull back, to let go before I felt him let go first, but he didn't allow me. "Don't," he said. "I'm not mad." He brought our hands down against his forehead, not looking at me when he asked, "Does it make it worse to be touching someone? I mean, is it harder to control?" "Sometimes," I admitted. I didn't know how to explain it, because I had never wanted to. "Sometimes, when I'm tired or upset, I'll pick up on someone's thoughts or a memory they're thinking about. But I can avoid being pulled in if I don't touch the person. Touching them when my head is like that, it's an automatic connection." "I thought so," Liam sighed, closing his eyes again. "You know, when we first met, you used to go out of your way to avoid touching us. I kept wondering if it was something you had been training to do at your camp, because every time one of us would try to touch you or talk to you, you jumped like we had shocked you." "I didn't want to hurt any of you," I whispered. His eyes flashed open again, somehow brighter than before. He nodded to our linked hands. "Is this okay?" "Are you okay?" I countered. I recognized the look on his face. It was nearly identical to the grief he'd worn at the rest stop, talking about his own camp. "What are you thinking about?" "I was thinking about how strange it is that we haven't even known each other for 2 weeks, but it feels like I've known you for much longer than that," he said. "And I'm thinking that it's frustrating to feel like I know certain parts of you so well, but other parts of you, I don't even know what your life was like before you went to camp." What could you tell him? What could I say about what I had done to my parents and to Sam that wouldn't scare him into letting go? "This is a place we don't have to lie," he said, motioning between us. "Didn't you tell me that?" "You remember?" "Of course I do," he said, "because I keep hoping that goes both ways, that if I ask you why you don't want to go home to your parents, you'll tell me the truth. Or if I ask you what Thurmond was really like, you'll stop lying. But then I realized that's not fair, because it's not like I want to talk about my family. It's like those—" I turned to look at him, waiting as if he tried to piece together his thought. "I don't know if I can explain it," he said. "It's hard to put into words. Those things, those memories, are mine, you know? They're things that the camp didn't take away when I went in, and they're the things I don't have to share if I don't want to. I guess that's stupid." "It's not stupid," I said. "That's not stupid at all. And I want to talk about everything with you. Everything. But I don't know what to tell you about Caledonia," he said. I don't know what I can tell you that won't make you hate me. I was stupid, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed, and I know that Charles and Zoo blame me for what happened, and I know that Cole has told Mom about it by now, and she's told Harry, and the thought just makes me sick. You did what you thought was right, I said. I'm sure they'll understand that. He shook his head, swallowing hard. I reached over with my other hand to brush the hair out of his eyes. The way he turned his face toward me again, closing his eyes and tilting his chin, made me brave enough to do it again. My fingers followed the natural wave of his hair, tracing the strands down around his ear. What do you want to do? I whispered. I've got to wake the others up, he said. We have to keep moving, on foot. My hand stilled, but it was clear that he had made his choice. What's the rush? I asked lightly. There, at the right corner of his mouth, where his scar met his lips, a faint smile. I think we could let them sleep, at least a few more hours. And then we'll hit the road. 2 hours rolled right on by around us. We both must have fallen asleep at some point, because by the time I opened my eyes, the condensation was shrinking against the glass, and a few rays of morning light had made their way to the forest floor. I stirred, so did Liam. For a while, we said and did nothing beyond working out the cricks and kinks from the awkward positions we slept in. When it came to finally letting go of his hand, I felt the first touch of cold air work its way from the outside. Wake up, team, he said. His shoulder popped as he reached back to slap Chubbs' knee. Time to carpe the hell out of this DM. Less than 1 hour later, we were standing in front of the black minivan, watching as Zoo did one last check under the seats. I buttoned my plaid shirt up to my throat and wrapped a red scarf I'd picked up around my neck 3 times. Not because I was all that cold, but because it helped to hide the disturbing bloodstains smeared down my front. Yikes. Liam's expression was grim as he leaned over and pulled my hair out from where it was trapped beneath the collar. Would you rather wear mine? I smiled and zipped his coat up for him. My forehead was still tender to the touch, and the stitches were as ugly as sin, but I was feeling better. Was it really that bad? Evil Dead 2 bad. Liam bent down to add a few of his clothes to my backpack. Something red appeared in his hand. Just about gave me a heart attack, Green. You can't really call her Green anymore, Chubbs pointed out. He was making the difficult decision about what books to abandon and which to take with him, and had seemed to settle on Watership Down, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and some book I had never heard of called Howard's End. Left behind were The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, and The Sound and the Fury, which Chubbs had taken to calling The Snore and the Just Kill Me. Yeah, I said. No more Green. All done? Liam called to Zoo when she gave him a thumbs up. He threw her pink bag over one shoulder and my backpack over the other. Any day now, Marian Librarian. I thought you were the one that wanted to check out. Chubbs gave him the finger, leaning forward to put his full weight into closing the briefcase. I leaned over to help him, trying to avoid the look on Liam's face as he stood there staring at Betty's mangled black shell. Zoo was crying without making a sound. Liam had his hands on her shoulders, holding her steady. Even Chubbs looked at the car with a rare softness, his fingers bunching up the fabric of his pants. I understand why we were parting ways with Betty now. The other skip tracers that had been with Lady Jane were still out there, and there was some chance that the woman who reported the car to whatever bounty network the skip tracers used. But I also understood why Liam had been so reluctant to do it. Unlike the abandoned and withered small towns we had driven through in West Virginia, the nearby cities and their populations were still holding on, which meant there would be a lot more folks on the road, and Betty, with her bullet holes and cracked windows, was not exactly inconspicuous. Then there was the fact that we had little to no gas left and no easy way of finding more, aside from going up and down and siphoning it from the abandoned cars along the nearby highway. There was too much traffic, too many potential eyes running down the road to do it. Liam had gotten us as close as he could do to Lake Prince, but it was anyone's guess how long it would be to walk there. It feels like we should do something, he said, like send her off on a barge out to sea or set her on fire. Let her go out in a blaze of glory. Chubbs raised an eyebrow. It's a minivan, not a Viking. Zoo pulled away from his grasp and headed for the trees to her left. Liam rubbed the back of his neck at a loss. Hey, he started. It's okay. But when Zoo reappeared in our line of sight, she wasn't empty-handed. Clutched between her fingers were 4 small yellow flowers, wild weeds by the looks of it. the kind we always used to have to pull up at Thurman's garden every spring. She walked over to the van, stood on her toes, and lifted up the closest windshield wiper. With delicate fingers, she positioned each flower in a row, keeping them straight across the cracked glass. Something cold and wet caught on my lashes. Not tears, but a misty rain, the kind that soaked you through slow and sure, driving you crazy with chills in the process. And I realized then how unfair it all was that we couldn't just crawl back inside the car. That even if we made it to the East River, we'd be soaked and sore for days. This car, this had been a safe place for them, for us. Now we had lost that too. I shoved my hands in my pockets and turned away, heading for the trees. My fingers brushed against something hard and smooth in my pocket, and I didn't need to pull it out to know it was the panic button. In the beginning, I had kept it because I wasn't sure I'd be able to protect them on my own. Now I had half a mind to drop it and let the ground claim it. Liam had confirmed everything that I'd suspected, but it seemed foolish to toss it then, when we were still a chance for us to use them like they would have used us. If a PSF or a skip tracer caught up to us now, I could press the button and the agents that showed up would be more than enough distraction for us to have a chance to get away. But it still didn't make me any less ashamed of how relieved I felt to find it still there, to know that Kate, with all her promises to take care of things, was still out there, still only a touch away. Liam thought the easiest and fastest way to navigate our small pack to the East River was to travel alongside the roads we would have taken if we'd still been in Betty. We were close enough to the highway to hear the occasional car whiz by or see a flash of some long silver-bellied semi-truck out of the corner of our eyes, but he reassured us out of their line of sight. This was the way he had traveled after escaping the League, how he had navigated through most of Virginia, how he hoped to get home. We were debating whether or not Chubbs had broken his toe against the exposed tree root when the wail of a truck's horn shattered the silence. The booms that came next were indefinitely worse, the thundering of something heavy falling and resounding crack of metal snapping. We all jumped. I dropped Zoo's hand to cover my ears. The way the tires squealed just before the crash came like a warning signal for white noise. Liam reached over and gently pried my hands from my ears. Come with me for a second. He turned back to the others. You guys watch the bags. Before the sound had even settled in the air, we heard the screams. Not the desperate kind, the ones you'd hear when someone was terrified or hurt or even out of their head with grief. This was a war cry, a rising rebel yell. After that, there was no chance of Zoo or Chubbs coming with us. They had stayed behind to watch the bags as Liam and I made our way to the line of trees that separated us from the rain-soaked asphalt of this highway. The semi-truck was on its side in the middle of the road, as if it had been flung there like a toy. The smell of burned rubber and smoke curled my stomach as we crouched down, and I was concerned about the trail of sparks in front of us would turn into a wall of flame. Liam stood up and was nearly at the shoulder of the road before my hand managed to catch his elbow. What are you doing? I had to shout over the noise of the rain pinging against the silver rippling body of the trailer. The driver needed help, yes, I knew that, but maybe it made me soulless and horrible, but I wasn't about to let Liam be the one to do it. Trucks didn't just flip over on their side for no reason either. There was another car and driver we couldn't see, or the yelling and the accident were connected. Liam and I were still standing out in the open when the figures in black came pouring out of the trees opposite us. Every inch of them was covered in black, from the ski masks pulling down over their faces and their black shoes. There was an entire highway between us, and still the sight of them was enough to make me reach out and grab Liam's arm, squeezing it until I was sure he'd be left with a permanent imprint of my fingers. There were at least 24 figures in black. They moved in unison, with practiced ease, and it was so weird, but watching them flood the road and divide into groups, one that went to the front of the truck, the other to the back, where the boxed contents were spilling out, reminded me of a football team running a play. The 4 of them sent to the front cab, climbed up, and ripped the door open. The driver who was screaming something in a language I didn't understand, was hauled to the ground. One of the black figures in black, a big one, with shoulders the size of Kansas, pulled a knife from his belt and signaled for the others to hold the driver down, pressed its silver blade against the man's palm. I heard a scream and didn't realize it had belonged to me until the same black monster's head swiveled towards us. Liam jumped at the 10 gun barrels that swung our way. The first bullet was close enough to nick his ear as it whistled by. There wasn't even time to turn and run. The firing stopped long enough for three of the figures to rush forward, screaming, "On your knees!" and "Head to the ground!" I wanted to run. Liam must have sensed this, because he latched onto my shoulder and forced me down, pressing the side of my face against the cold, rough asphalt. The rain picked up, filling my ear, my nose, my mouth, as I tried to bite back another scream. "We're not armed," I heard Liam shout. "Easy, easy!" "Save it, asshole," someone hissed. It was intimately familiar with what it felt like to have a barrel of a gun digging into my skin. Whoever was doing this had no qualms about dropping a knee onto my back along with their entire weight. The gun's metal mouth was cold against my cheek, and I felt someone weave a hand in my hair and give a sharp twist. That's when I disconnected from the pain and lifted a hand, trying to twist my body enough to grab whoever was holding me. I was not powerless. We were not going to die here. "Not those," I heard Liam say. He was begging. "Please." "Aw, don't want your precious papers to get wet?" The same voice as before. "How about you try being more worried about yourself or your girl here, huh? Huh?" He sounded like a jock, amped up on too much juice and game adrenaline. Someone stomped their foot down on the same hand I was trying to maneuver toward the attacker's skin. I let out a choked cry, wishing I could turn my head to see what was causing Liam to do the same. "Dr. Charles Merriweather," the voice read out. "2775 Arlington Court, Alexandria, Virginia, George Fields." The letters. "Stop it," Liam said. "We didn't do anything. We didn't see anything. Just—" "Charles Merriweather?" another voice said, also male, this one with a heavier southern accent. I almost didn't hear him over the rain. "George Fields?" "Yeah, like Jack Fields?" "Yes." Liam made the connection a full second before I did. This was a trap. These were the kids. "Yes, we're PSI. Please, we're PSI like you." "Lee? Liam Stewart?" There was a shuffle of feet running toward us. "Mike? That you?" That from Liam. "Oh my God. Stop, stop." The gun lifted off my face, but I was still pinned to the ground. "I know him. That's Liam Stewart." "Stop, Hayes, get off him." "He saw. You know the rules." "Jesus, are you deaf?" Mike yelled. "The rules apply to adults. They're kids, you asshole." I don't know if Liam finally managed to throw him off, or if Mike's words did the trick, but I felt Liam rise next to me and opened my eyes in time to see Liam drive his shoulder into the black figure on top of me. I gulped in a full chest of air. "Are you all right?" he asked. He put his hands on either side of my face. "Ruby, look at me. You okay?" My hands came up to grab his. I nodded. Of the 6 guys gathered around us, only 2 pulled their knit ski caps up off their faces. The big kid, big in a Hercules kind of way, with the ruddy skin and black paint under both eyes, and another with olive coloring, shaggy brown hair pulled back into a short ponytail. The latter was Mike. He reached over and pulled the letters out of Hercules' hand and pressed them against his own chest. "Lee, man, I'm so sorry. I never thought—" Mike choked up. Liam let go of one of my hands to clap him on the back. "What the hell are you doing here?" Liam took the letters back from him and reached back to draw me forward again. "We're okay now," he told me. It seemed to be true enough. The other kids in black had lost interest in us the minute Mike stepped up. "God, Lee," he said, wiping the rain off his face. "Oh my God, I can't believe you actually made it out." Liam's voice was tight. "I thought you were with Josh when—" "I was, but I got through the fields," he added, "thanks to you." Another kid, this one with skin as dark as Chubb's, jerked his thumb in the direction of Liam. "This is Lee Stewart?" he demanded. "From Caledonia?" "From North Carolina," Liam said, with surprising venom. Mike gripped Liam's hand, his entire body shaking. "The others. Did you see any of the others make it out?" Liam hesitated. I knew what he was thinking, and I wondered if he would tell Mike the truth about how many kids actually escaped that night. Instead, their watches went off at once, a shrill beep. "That's time," Hercules said to the others. "Grab the supplies and head back. The uniforms will be here any second." A single gunshot punctuated his order like an exclamation point, thundering across the open road. Liam and I both jumped back away from them. The kids at the back of the truck were tossing down the entirety of the truck's load, boxes and crates of brightly colored fruit. My lips parted at the sight of the green bananas, just a few days shy of being ripe. When they moved off and started back toward the tree, I had a clear view of the truck driver being rolled, unconscious and bound, into the ditch alongside the road. So you're what? Liam rubbed the back of his neck. Rating anyone stupid enough to drive by? It's a supply hit, Mike said. We're just trying to bring in a little food to eat, and this is the only way that works for us. We just have to do it fast, in and out before anyone notices us and can follow us back home. Back home? Yeah, where are you guys headed? Mike had to shout over the people shouting for him. You should come with us. We already have our own tribe, thanks, Liam said. Mike's dark brows furrowed. We're not a tribe. Not like that, at least. We're with the Slip Kid. You heard of him? Chapter 21. The East River, after all that speculating, nothing more than a camping ground. A big one, of course, but nothing I hadn't seen before a dozen times over with my parents. After the build-up that Mike and the others had given it, you would have thought we were walking towards Heaven's Pearly Gates, not some old camping spot that had been called Chesapeake Trails in its past life. Since Mike had been the one to convince the others to take us along, he was the one stuck babysitting us as we hiked up the muddy, unpaved road, saddled with boxes of fruit that were as heavy as they were tempting. We go on these things, we call them hits, to gather up supplies for camp, stuff like food, medicine, you name it. We also raid stores from time to time. Liam had given me his jacket to wear to ward off the rain, though it had turned into a faint drizzle as we walked. The damage had already been done to the flimsy cardboard boxes in our arms. Every now and then, the bottom of a carton would give out completely, and whatever kid was carrying it would be forced to stuff the sodden piles of fruit into their pockets, or carried them cupped in their shirts. Kids were doubling back to pick up scattered bright trail as we were leaving behind. Every once in a while, I would catch myself from being distracted by the bright trail we were leaving behind. When Mike had his back turned to us, Liam snuck a hand in the top box and held an orange out in front of my face, a shy smile on his lips. When he dropped it in my jacket's pocket, he leaned over, his sweatshirt hood slipping off my head, and pressed a light kiss against my bruised cheek. After that, the cold trickle on my skin seemed to evaporate. Ow, ow, ow! Chubbs chanted behind us. Ow, ow, ow. You know, Mike said, it gives me hope that after everything he's been through, Chubbs is still the same Chubbs we all know and love. Aw, that's not true, Liam said. This is Chubbs 2.0. He hasn't cried once this entire walk. Give him a few minutes, Greg snorted. I'm sure he won't let us down. Hey, I said in a low, warning voice. Not funny. Chubbs was still trailing behind, the gap between us growing with each mile marker we passed. I stopped and waited for him, not wanting him to feel like he was being left behind. Need some help? I asked, as he limped to me. My box isn't too heavy. And his was, I could tell. He was saddled with grapefruit. I could see in his eyes that he desperately wanted to trade, even if it was only for a few minutes. Instead, he lifted his chin and said, over the cardboard flap, I'm fine, though I appreciate your asking. Liam and Mike burst out laughing at something. Even Zoo looked back to grin at them, Liam's hat falling over her eyes. It was amazing how much better Liam looked after only a few hours. His face was animated with a new kind of energy I hadn't seen. Well, ever. What was he like? I asked quietly when he was in camp. Chubbs bled a long sigh. Well, for one thing, he was a lot more annoying with his whole, we're gonna make it, guys. We're gonna get out one day, Pollyanna shtick. That's been dying a slow death now that he's realized just how sucky everything actually is. He stopped to shift the box in his arms. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? Lee is Lee. Everyone loved him, even some of the PSFs. They picked him out of all the blues to be the runner for the control center of our camp. Yeah? And what were you like in camp? I asked, smiling. Ignored, for the most part, he said, unless I was with Lee. As if he heard his name, Lee turned. Hurry up, ladies. We're going to be left behind. Mike was in the middle of explaining how he had hitchhiked from Ohio to Virginia after breaking out of Caledonia when Chubbs and I had finally caught up to them. Sue tugged the sleeve of my jacket and pointed through the trees to our left. I had been so involved in my conversation with Chubbs that I had completely missed the silky blue lake that had suddenly come into view. The clouds pulled back, revealing the sun high overhead. The water sparkled under its touch, throwing its light around the trees that lined its every shade.
Through them, I could see a small T-shaped wood dock at the other end, and beyond that, several wooden cabins. So, it's more of a place to hide then, Liam was saying. Can he help us get in touch with our folks? Mike frowned. I guess, but he usually asks that you stay and help with camp for a few weeks in return. Plus, why would you want to go home now? It's much safer here. I could tell Chubbs wanted to press this issue, but Liam charged on with yet another question. How long has the slick guy had this set up? 2 years or so, I think, Mike answered. Man, I can't wait until you meet him. You are going to lose your mind. Chubbs rolled his eyes heavenward, and I got the distinct impression that he and Mike were not that fond of each other. And there are hundreds of kids here just roaming around unchecked, I asked. How has he been able to stay here so long without the PSFs catching on? Mike had already explained how the camp worked, all the kids who had gathered there, some who had escaped from camps or capture, others that had been able to hide out long enough to avoid it altogether, had responsibilities. Oh, see, now that's the beauty of being under the Slip Kid's protection, Mike said. The PSFs can't attack him because of who he is and what he could do to them. Even old Gray is terrified of him. I know who it is, Liam snapped his fingers. Santa. Zoo giggled. You're not too far off, Mike said. This is going to sound super sappy, so feel free to give me shit for it. But every day here feels like Christmas. I saw what he meant right away. Once we reached the clearing that, I assumed, had once been used for campers to set up tents, we were surrounded by dozens of kids. To our right, teens were playing volleyball with an actual mat. I heard a few shrieks of laughter and stopped to let a few little girls run by in front of me. They were the ones that caught Zoo's attention. They all looked happy, up and shiny and smiley. And clean, not covered in cuts and bruises and mud like we were, but in decent clothes and shoes. A few kids lounging under the trees stopped whenever they were actually doing and actually helped us carry the fruit boxes towards the white building marked office camp/shop without being asked or prompted. The office/camp shop was the sturdiest of the structures we had passed so far, built in a more permanent style than smaller log cabins with their dark green doors. This is where we keep the food, Mike said, like he was the most exciting thing we were ever going to hear, and where the Slip Kid runs the whole show. I'll bring you guys in for an introduction. Get permission for you to stay a while. We need permission? Chubbs asked. What happens if he says no? He's never said no before, Mike said, shifting the box onto his shoulder so he could drop an arm around Chubbs' shoulder. Seeing he had my attention, he grinned ear to ear. Now, you couldn't have been at Caledonia. I would remember a face like yours. I think he thought he was being charming with those dark eyes and dimples. He looked over at Lee, who was fighting back a smile as he watched my reaction. Where did she come from, and where can I find one? Picked this one up at a gas station in West Virginia. Bargain price, Lee said. Last one on the shelf. Sorry. Mike laughed again, giving Chubbs' shoulder a little squeeze before he hopped up the steps, ducking under a white sheet that had been strung up over the building's small porch. I glanced at it, then had to look again. The enormous black sign painted there had stopped Sue dead in her tracks and turned her face a sickly shade. I couldn't move, couldn't look away from it. Liam cleared his throat, his jaw working as if to try to shake the words loose. It was enough to stop Zoo and me dead in our tracks at least. Alarm lit up her face like a candle. Liam gave his friend a confused look. What? Mike asked, seeing our reactions. Any reason in particular you've decorated this fine establishment with our mortal enemy's symbol? Liam said. It was the first time I had seen Mike's expression drop the entire time we'd been with him, which was close to 2 hours. Something hardened in his eyes, something strained the muscles in his jaw. That's our symbol, isn't it? It's PSI. It should represent us, not them. How do you explain the black then? Liam said as he pressed. The armbands, the shirts. He was right. Everyone, in some form or another, had the color on them. Most were apparently satisfied with tying the black band around their arm, but others, and not just the ones that had hit the truck for supplies, were in head to toe black. Black is the absence of all colors, Mike said. We don't segregate by color here. We respect one another and our abilities, and we all help one another understand them. I thought if anyone would be on board with that, it'd be you, Lee. Oh, no, no, I am on board. I am like captain of that ship, Lee said. I was just confused, that's all. Black is the color. Got it. The screen door creaked open again. Mike caught it with his foot. Coming? Inside, I was surprised to feel a wave of heat hit my face and see the overhead lights on. Electricity. I remember Greg mentioning something about the Yellows rigging the system to work. But did they have running water too? The front rooms were filled with piles of blankets and bedding, a few stacked mattresses, and a number of unidentifiable gray plastic tubs. The back room, the shop and the office slash camp shop combo, was right of the small white tiled kitchen. Mike waved to the kids inside, who were turning whatever delicious creation was inside their pots with long wooden spoons. The old store's wood shelves were painted with a dour green, but stuffed with rainbow assortments of canned food and bags of chips, pasta, and even marshmallows. Liam let out a low whistle at the sight of the boxes of cereal stacked high over our heads. I thought Chubbs might cry. We left the fruit on the floor in the shady corner of the room, near a girl with cropped blonde hair and a midriff bearing black shirt. She was still clapping her hands in delight, bouncing on her toes. She couldn't have been more than 14 or 15, and seemed to have as many piercings in the cartilage of each ear. I know you'd be happy, Lizzie, Mike said, tossing her a grapefruit. We haven't had fruit in ages, he said, her pitch rising with every word. I hope this all keeps for a few weeks. Mike led us out of the room, leaving Lizzie to coo over the pineapples and oranges. Let's go upstairs. He should be done meeting with the security team by now. Hayes handles hits, but Olivia, you'll meet her, coordinates watch duty around the perimeter of camp. If you want, I can talk to her about getting you assigned there. He looked down at Sue. But unfortunately for you, my dear, everyone under 13 has to sit through lessons. That caught Chubbs' attention. What kind of lessons? School stuff, I guess. Math, a little science, some reading. Depends on whatever books we're able to scrounge. It's important to the boss that everyone gets the basics down. Mike stopped at the top of the stairs and looked over his shoulder. I know you never liked using them, but there are lessons on how to use your abilities too. Chubbs cleared his throat behind me. I'm fine with what Jack taught me. Jack. Mike's voice trailed off. Man, I miss that kid. On our walk over, he explained that there were 5 kids from Caledonia living in the Slip Kids camp. Mike was the only one from Liam's old room, but there were 2 blue girls, one yellow boy, and a green who had somehow made it all the way to eastern Virginia. The second story of the building was more of an attic. The entire floor was one open room, but it was a nice one. Mike knocked on the door, waiting for the come in before daring to twist the handle. I heard Chubbs let out a nervous squeak, and I was surprised to feel my own heart skip a beat. The door opened to the middle of the room. To the right was a white curtain, drawn all the way over to hide what I thought was probably the living area. The window behind the curtain let in enough light to hint at the shape of a bed and dresser. The other half of the room was set up like an office. There were 2 bookshelves filled with binders and books of every shape and size. An old metal desk with peeling black paint sat in between, and there were 2 simple chairs in front of the desk, with a long table pushed to the far left wall with all sorts of electronic equipment. A TV was on, set to one of the news channels, President Gray's face filling the screen, flanked by 2 American flags. His mouth moved, but the TV had been muted. The only sound, aside from Chubbs's sharp intake of breath, was Clancy's gray fingers striking the keys of the silver laptop. I would have recognized him even if he had shaved his thick, wavy black hair, if he had tattooed his cheeks or pierced his long, straight nose. I had spent 6 years staring up at every single one of his portraits at Thurmond, memorizing every mole, every shape of his thin lips. I was even intimately familiar with the peak of his hairline. But it was nothing like seeing the real thing. Those portraits hadn't captured his dark eyes, and they certainly hadn't been able to predict how striking he'd turn out to be as he aged. Just a sec. He glanced up from his screen in our direction and immediately did a double take. Boss? Mike said. You okay? The president's son rose slowly, shutting the lid of his laptop. The rolled up sleeves of his white shirt slid down his tan arms. This is a slip kid? I thought. Surprise was an understatement. Brain-numbing shock. The kind that reduced my train of thought to an inching crawl was an understatement. I didn't even have a second to collect myself before the next 3 words passed his lips. There was no way I could have, because Clancy Gray looked straight at me and said the very last thing on earth I expected. Ruby Elizabeth Daly. My reaction was way too strong for something as innocent as my full name. It wasn't like he had spat out 3 vile curse words or screamed, "Kill them now!" or "Lock them up!" I shouldn't have stumbled back, tripping over my own boots, but I was nearly to the door before I even realized it. Clancy took a step forward, but Liam pushed him back. Hard. "Lee!" Mike sounded scandalized. Clancy held up his hands. "Sorry. I'm sorry. My bad. I should have realized how that would sound. I was just surprised to see you." He leaned around Liam with an apologetic smile, and I paused at the door, momentarily stunned by how white and straight his teeth were. "I've read your file so many times on so many different networks that I feel like we've already met. There are so many people out there looking for you right now. And which one do you plan on turning her over to?" Chubb snapped. I stood still, letting Zoo keep one arm wrapped around my waist. Clancy's face flushed at the accusation. His dark eyes flicked back and forth from me. "None of them. I just collect information, watch the networks to see what everyone is buzzing about. And that just happens to be you, Miss Daly." He paused, rubbing a hand absently over his shoulder. "Let's see if I remember all of this. Born in Charlottesville, Virginia, but raised in Salem by her mother, Susan, a teacher, and her father, Jacob, a police officer. Attended Salem Elementary until your 10th birthday, when your father called into the station reporting an unknown child in his house." "Stop," I muttered. Liam looked over his shoulder, trying to divide his tension between me and the boy reciting the sordid tale of my life. "But bad luck. The PSFs beat the police to your house, and good luck someone dropped the ball, or they would have had they had other kiddies to pick up because they didn't wait around long enough to question your parents, and thus didn't pre-sort you. And then you came to Thurmond, and you managed to avoid their detecting you were orange." "Stop!" I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want anyone to hear this. "What's the matter with you?" Liam shouted. "Can't you see you're upsetting her?" Clancy, maybe anticipating another hard shove, moved to the other side of his desk. "I'm excited to meet her, that's all. It's not often you find another orange." A spark lit at the center of my chest, spreading quickly up to my brain. He is an orange. The rumors were right. He might actually be able to help me. "But weren't you reformed?" I asked slowly. "Isn't that why they let you out?" "You, of all people, should know they can't reform shit at Thurmond, Ruby," he said. "How was good old Thurmond, by the way? I had the dubious honor of being its first inmate. Got to see them build the mess hall brick by brick. Did they really hang my picture up everywhere?" A better question, did he really think I was going to pull up a chair and shoot the breeze about the good old days? Clancy sighed. "Anyway, if you're Ruby, then you must be Lee Stewart. I've read your file too." "Anything good in there?" Mike asked with a nervous laugh. The PSFs have been following your every move," Clancy said, leaning back in his chair. "Which means you need a place to lie low for a while, right?" Liam hesitated a split second before nodding. "You made a good choice coming here. You can stay as long as you need." Clancy rested his hands on his chest. "Now that I've managed to upset everyone, Mike, do you want to take them to the cabin to get them set up in their rotations?" Mike nodded. "For the record, you didn't upset me, boss." Clancy laughed, rich and slow. "Okay, good. Thanks for all your hard work today, by the way. Sounds like it was a good haul." "Like you wouldn't believe," Mike said, moving toward the door. He waved after him, but he no longer looked at us with the same warmth. "Cabin 18 is open, right?" "Yeah, Ty and his guys went tribal on us," Clancy said. "I don't know that anyone has gone in to clean it since they left, though, so I apologize if it's a mess." And then he was staring at me again, one corner of his lips turning up, then the other. A warm fizzling sensation filled my head, sending my pulse spiking. I turned away and broke eye contact, but the image still flooded my mind, spilling in until I thought I might choke. My mind's eye. I saw Clancy and me alone in the same room, him on one knee, offering a rose in my direction. "Forgive me?" His voice was loud in my ears, echoing as I stumbled down the stairs. How had he done that? Waltzed right through every single one of my natural defenses? And why was my brain suddenly alive and reaching out for whatever was closest? Whoever was stupid enough to let me in? I lifted my face from where I had buried it, against Liam's shoulder. When I had done that, when had I done that? When had we gotten outside? And when had we walked all the way to the cabin? Liam's eyes tried to catch mine as I pulled away. My head ached, physically ached for him. It was too dangerous to stand so close to him. "Not right now," I whispered. Liam's brows drew together and his lips parted to say something he wanted to say. After a moment, he only nodded and turned back toward the cabin, bounding up the steps. I needed to get as far away from them as I could, at least until the trilling inside of my head died down. There was no plan or map involved. I just set off down a nearby path. A few kids, all strangers, called after me in concern, but I ignored them, following the smell of mud and molding leaves until I found the lake we had passed. The trees and brush had overgrown the path down to the T-shaped wooden dock. Where there weren't any plants in the way, there was a rope along the sign that had warned, "Do not enter." I slipped under it and kept heading down, not stopping until I sat on the edge of the old sun-bleached dock and put my hand between my knees, listening to the sound of kids laughing and yelling in the distance, wondering when the feeling would return to my long legs enough for me to stand, and when the implant of Clancy's voice would fade. Alone, I thought, lying down on the old wood, finally alone. Dinner was served at exactly 7 that night. There was no intercom or alarm system in the camp, but there were cowbells. Apparently was a universal call for food, because once the first bell rang, others echoed back, spreading the noise throughout the cabins and the trails, all the way down to where I sat studying my reflection in the dark water. It was easy enough to find the action. 200-odd kids gathered around a raging bonfire to eat wasn't exactly subtle. My feet slowed the closer I came, watching as a few of the older boys threw more logs into the fire, grasping fingers. Rings of old logs provided makeshift seats for those who had already had their food and didn't want to eat alone in their cabins. The kids we had seen in the kitchen had set up a table full of what looked like slow cookers and were making runs between the office building and the fire to replenish them. Dozens of kids waited in line for their turn at the pots, their plastic bowls pressed against their chests in anticipation. I spotted Liam straight off, standing rather than sitting on one of the logs. He had a bowl of chili in each hand and was scanning the area. Chubbs would have walked right by him if Liam hadn't nudged him as he passed. He asked Chubbs something, but I only caught part of his response. No thanks. I reloaded the flies. I know how this works. Everyone starts dancing around the fire and painting their faces and worshipping a decapitated pig, and then someone gets hit by a boulder and plummets to their death. And, surprise, it's the fat kid in glasses. Liam starts laughing, but even I could see how uncomfortable Chubbs looked. I think they're going to play it safe and go read. And hey, there's Ruby. You two can enjoy the degeneration of human decency without me. Liam rolled around so fast, his footing slipped, and he came dangerously close to dropping both bowls on a bushy-haired girl sitting next to him. Have fun, Chubbs said as he hurried past me. I caught his sleeve and swung back around. What's wrong? I asked. He shrugged, a sad smile curling at the end of his lips. I'm just not up for it tonight, I guess. I knew the feeling. After it being just the four of us alone for so long, suddenly being around so many people, even if they were kids like us, was a little stressful. If he hadn't liked it when one new person, me, had invaded his world, I could only imagine what this was doing to his nerves. Well, if you change your mind, we'll be here. Chubbs patted my head fondly and continued up the dirt trail back to our assigned cabin. What's gotten into him? Liam asked, offering me the steaming bowl of food. I think he's just tired, I said, and left it at that. Where's Zoo? He nodded to the left, where sure enough, Zoo's smiling face had appeared in the center of the small group of boys and girls her age. When she saw me, she waved. I wonder how it was possible for her face to be so brilliant. The Asian girl sitting next to her nodded as Zoo gestured her, as if knowing her every thought without having her whisper a word. When Zoo reached over to knock back the hood of the girl's Virginia is for Lover sweatshirt, she revealed a long, glossy black braid. Oh my god, I said, making the connection instantly. What's wrong? That kid was in your camp, I said. I saw her in Zoo's nightmare. They got separated. Really? The dawning realization that spread across his face was adorable. Guess that explains why they tackled one another to the ground earlier. I laughed. They did? Yeah, they were rolling around like puppies in the grass. Hey, Zoo. She looked our way. Come here a sec. No, bring your friend. When the two girls were on their feet, I was surprised to see the other girl stood a good 4 inches above Zoo's head, though she looked like she couldn't have been more than a year older than her. Zoo took the girl's hand and flounced over to us, grinning. She was back to wearing the hot pink dress. Hi there, Liam said, holding his hand out to the girl. My name is Liam, and this is. I know who you are, the girl interrupted. Liam and Ruby. She crossed her arms over her chest. Suzume, Suzume told me all about you. Told you. Told you, or. Of course she didn't tell me, the girl huffed, earning a sharp elbow to her side. She turned and said something to Zu in Japanese, who in turn shook her head and reached up to tug the girl's braid. Okay, fine. The tall girl turned back to us and flanked the campfire. I'm Hina. Suzume is my cousin. Oh, wow, I said, looking at Zu. Are you serious? That's amazing. She was bouncing on her toes, still smiling. And you were at Caledonia together, right? Liam said, slowly. Zu, why didn't you mention it? We could have tried to track her down. Are you a yellow too? I'm a green, Hina said, pointing to her full head of hair. Duh. Zu gave us an apologetic shrug before tugging Hina away, back to the circle of younger kids who were engrossed in some sort of card game. Liam toward me with a look of pure amazement. Did I just get sassed by a 12-year-old? I guess it runs in the family, I said, spinning my spoon around in my bowl. The chili was warm with a wonderful kick. I didn't think I'd eaten anything other than the slop they served at Thurmond and junk food in almost 7 years, and the fact that someone had even put the barest amount of effort into it. I had to go back and get seconds, thirds, until I physically could not stuff myself any more. Being so close to the fire with a belly as full of full and delicious food was making me feel drowsy and safe. I slid down off the log so I was sitting on the ground, reclining against Liam's legs. That reminds me, Liam said. Would you believe Zu actually started jumping up and down and clapping when I told her she had to get up at 7 and do some good old-fashioned book learning with the other cubbies? Cubbies? Daily lessons. School. He tapped my nose with the clean end of his spoon. Stick around, Ruby Tuesday, and you'll start picking up on the cool kid lingo too. When we finished eating, Liam set both of our bowls in one of the many plastic tubs floating by. The blue controlling the closest one to us was a skinny kid who looked like he weighed about half what the tub did. I blinked once, twice, wondering if I was imagining it, if it was the first time I had ever seen kids use their abilities so frivolously. It was a strange contrast to what was otherwise a picture of normalcy, at least what I assumed normalcy looked like. A few kids strummed on guitars or used their logs as a drum set. Most were talking quietly or playing card games. Liam slid down behind me, finding just enough room between my back and the old log. The shimmering air around the flames, combined with the delicious heat, made my muscles turn to mush. His hand came up to brush the stray strands of hair off the back of my neck. I leaned back against until I was resting against his chest, nestled between his knees. You okay now, darlin'? He whispered in my ear. I nodded, my fingers finding the bare skin of his forearms, tracing the muscles and overlaying veins there, on a discovery mission, searching for something I hadn't even realized I wanted until now. His skin was so soft, his hands warm and wide, knuckles bruised and torn with brittle scabs. I pressed my own hand on top of his, weaving our fingers together. I had to be alone for a little while, but I'm okay now. All right, he whispered. The next time, don't go where I can't find you. I didn't doze off so much as relax. It seemed like the longer I sat there, the quieter my head became, and the more the aches and knots in my body worked themselves out, leaving me as soft as the dirt underneath us. Eventually, someone brought out a decades-old boombox, and even the kids with guitars stopped playing in deference to the Beach Boys, who seemed to be the only one in our entire camp who didn't dance. But it was fun to watch the others, Zu in particular, as she twisted her hips and threw her arms in the air, at least until she ran up to us and began to tug on our arms. I managed to beg off, but Liam didn't have nearly as much willpower. They were both laughing when the track switched to Barbara Ann, Twirling Wind, Fun, Fun, Fun came on. I should have known something was up when they both turned to me wearing identical devious looks. Liam held up a finger in my direction, beckoning me over to him. I laughed and shook my hands in front of me. No. He grinned, his first real grin in days, and I felt something tug at my belly button. The sensation was warm, tingling, and familiar. Liam pretended he wasn't hauling in a line, and Zu actually stopped her frolicking to act it out with him. Their faces were flushed and glowing with a sheen of sweat. With nothing but fine dust and mud between us, I slid right over to them, right into Liam's outstretched hands. No fair, I whined. Come on, Green, he said. You could use a good dance. Zoo spun around us, weaving her arms in time to Wouldn't It Be Nice? I put my hand over Liam's, letting him drop it over one of his shoulders. He took my other hand without asking and held it lightly in his own. Step up on my feet. I gave him what I hoped was an incredulous look. Trust me. Come on before our song is over. Against all my better judgment, I put my feet over his, waiting for him to wince at my weight. At least his bones felt sturdier under mine. A little closer, Green. I won't bite. I leaned forward, close enough that my cheek was resting against his shoulder. Liam's hand tightened around mine, and I found my other hand bunched in the fabric of his shirt, and I was embarrassed because I was positive he could feel my heart hammering in my chest. No spinning, I said. I wasn't sure if my head or heart could keep up. Up close, he was so warm and so beautiful, I was already dizzy enough. No spinning, he agreed. We began to move. It wasn't really dancing, just some glorified swaying, back and forth, nice and easy. For once, my brain was perfectly content to keep my hands to itself. The muscles moved slow, like honey. We were completely out of sync with the song, and then we weren't even moving at all. My cheek rested on his shoulders, and my hand on the small his and the hand on the small of my back slipped under my shirt and curled against the skin there. When the bells rang again, this time signaling lights out across the camp, there was an audible groan, loud enough to get Liam chuckling. I didn't realize how tired I was until we separated. Bedtime, he called, waving Zoo over. She stood, brushing herself off, signaling something to the group of kids she was leaving. The fire popped and hissed, buckling under a warm, steady stream from a nearby hose. The sound, the sound it made was like an animal having the life squeezed out of it. When the lights had finally gone out, settling down into a pile of an unimpressive embers spread out among the ash, there was nothing but a screen of smoke to separate me from where Clancy Gray sat on the other side of the pit, watching me with dark eyes. Chapter 22. There was something Clancy Gray liked to do, apparently. Watch me. Watch me while I sat out on the porch helping Zoo lace her new tennis shoes before walking with her and Hina to the cabin serving as the classroom. Watch me tease Chubbs for being the first and only to get bitten by a tick. Watch me wait by a fire pit for Mike to arrive with what our duties would be during our time at East River. All this watching from the window on the second story of his office, where he appeared to control everything and do nothing. Mike had mentioned that everyone older than 13 would be responsible for doing some work. I just hadn't realized that the assignments were chosen for you. I don't mind helping out in the pantry, organizing and counting our supplies, but I would have so preferred being out with Chubbs in the camp small garden, or running around the forest with Liam on security detail. It was strange not to spend my entire day with them. The kids I worked with were nice enough, more than nice, actually. Most of them had seen the inside of a camp, but then again, I had never cooked a meal, so it wasn't like any of us were winning in the life experience department. What I liked most was their brand of pluck. Lizzie, for instance, had been hiding out at East River for close to 2 years, having narrowly escaped being captured by the PSFs who had pulled her parents' car over in Maryland. You just got out and ran? I asked. Like the wind, she confirmed. Didn't have anything on me at all, except what I was wearing. I tried to meet up with my parents again, but they never went back to our old house. I got picked up by a tribe of Greens and brought here. There was another thing. Most of the kids here were either green or blue, with a small tight-knit group of yellows that didn't really socialize outside of their own circle. Lizzie claimed that there used to be more, but the Slip Kid had given them permission to head out and form a tribe of their own. He gave them permission? I repeated, marking down how many boxes of cereal we had left. Yeah, and there are other requirements, too. That, from Dylan, a small-boned kid who had only recently finished his cubby's lesson. He claimed the nickname came from the wood shelving unit Clancy had built to store all of their books and schoolwork. You have to have at least a group of 5, he continued, and then Clancy has to determine whether or not it's safe, and you have to swear in your life to not reveal anything about the camp, unless it's to another kid in need. And then you can only reveal the clue. It's to keep everyone safe. It would kill him if something happened to a kid because of him. I felt myself soften a little then. It wasn't so much that I didn't trust Clancy's motivations, he just unnerved me. When someone takes such an interest in you, you have to wonder what exactly they're searching for in your face. What are you doing? All three of us looked over to the door, where Clancy stood stiff and still, staring at me. The wind from the open door behind him tugged at his dark hair, causing it to stand on end. Something inside of me coiled at his expression, but it wasn't fear. We're sorting, Lizzie said, confused. Is something wrong? Clancy snapped out of whatever daze he had been stuck in. Yeah, sorry, it's just. Ruby, would you mind coming with me for a second? I think there is some confusion on your assignment. I passed my clipboard back to Lizzie, wondering why her eyes narrowed at me. I was assigned to storage, I said, when we were standing outside on the porch. I didn't assign you anything, he said. I specifically told Mike that. I'd like to think that I wasn't the type of person to be easily intimidated by other kids, even ones that were taller, stronger, or better armed than I was, so I'm not sure why it hit me then that I was talking to Clancy Gray, the son of the most powerful man in the country, a blue-blooded American prince who wore his black polo with his collar popped up to match a cable-knit sweater. He was even wearing a leather belt. I crossed my arms over my chest. I'm more than capable of pulling my weight. Out of the sunlight, he was far less intimidating than he was in the shade, and shorter. It was possible his reputation had added imaginary inches, but he was only a bit taller than I was, which meant both Liam and Chubb stood nearly a full head over him. Not that I did anything to knock off his title of the most attractive person I had ever seen. Clancy was lean, but not slight, well kept, but not groomed, composed, but not comfortable. I thought as the wind blew against us that he might have been wearing some spicy cologne, but that seemed ridiculous. I was glad we were out on the porch, where everyone by the fire pit could see us. I didn't think he was going to hurt me or anything like that. Why would he? I felt my hands clasped together in front of me, then move to my side, then rise up to cup my elbows, like he couldn't figure out what they wanted to be doing. I hadn't forgotten my whole purpose in coming here, but I couldn't bring myself to ask for his help. He clearly had a good enough grasp on his own abilities if he was voluntarily diving into people's minds. The question should have come as naturally as breathing. If these kids following his every whim and order, it had to be because he was a good guy, right? People didn't help other people just for their health. Clancy had the kind of confidence that made him the sun at the center of the East River's galaxy. Everything and everyone orbited around his light. So why couldn't I bring myself to ask? Why were my hands still shaking? I know you probably won't ever come around to liking me after our introduction, he said, but I am sorry. It didn't occur to me that you were keeping that information secret. It's fine, I said, but what does that have to do with my work assignment? For a few minutes, he didn't say anything at all. He just stared. Will you stop? I muttered, feeling both flustered and annoyed at once. If I say you're forgiven, will you stop doing that? His mouth turned up into a handsome grin. No. Clancy, who apparently had never been taught about respecting someone's personal space, took a step forward, and I took a step back off the porch, my feet sinking into the sticky mud. Instead of backing off, he seemed to take it as a challenge and came toward me again. For whatever reason, mostly the flutter of my nerves and my gut, I let him. Listen, he said finally. The reason I told Mike not to assign you anything is because I'm hoping you'll come work with me. Excuse me? Come on, you heard me. His hands closed over my arm, and it was like a bee had been set loose inside my skull. My brain seemed to lurch forward, full speed, back into life, flooding with milky white images of the two of us sitting in front of his desk, staring at each other as a fire devoured everything around us. The images he was flooding into my mind. I don't know how he did it, but it was so real. The image was burning me up from the inside out, blistering my lungs. Pockets of acrid smoke bubbled up under my skin until it felt like I was about to burst open. My visions burned to black at the edges. Fire bloomed on my clothes, singed my hair. This is not real. This is not real. This is not real. Clancy must have let go, or I must have found a way to twist away, because just as quickly as the fire came, it went back out, dispersing in 3 shaky exhales. You can't block me, he said, his eyes wide. Do you even know how to use your abilities? The file the League had on you made it sound like you could control it. Wasn't it obvious? I shook my head. That's why I'm here, I wanted to say. That's why I need you. His gaze flickered down on me, from my head back up to my toes, and again. When he spoke, his voice was soft, sympathetic. Look, I know how it is. You don't think I struggled with this too? How lonely it is to not be able to touch someone the way you want to? How terrifying it is to be trapped in someone else's head without knowing a way out? Ruby, everything I've learned I had to teach myself, and it was awful. I wanted to save you from it. I can teach you things, tricks, how to use your talents the way they're meant to be used. I hoped he couldn't see the way my hands were shaking. Oh my god, he had offered. I hadn't even had to ask. And I still couldn't say a damn thing. Clancy's posture relaxed, and when he touched me again, flicking the braid back over my shoulder, there was no ill will behind it. Think about it, okay? If you decide you want to just come up to my office, I'll clear my schedule for you. I pressed my lips together, biting down hard on my tongue. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know how to use your abilities, Clancy added. That's the only way we're ever going to beat them. Beat who? There are so few of us left, he said. Until you showed up in my system, I actually thought I was the only one. Well, there's at least one more. His name is Martin. And he's with the Children's League, he finished. I know. I accessed the report on him. Creepy kid. When I said us, I meant non-psychotic oranges. I snorted. I'll think about it, I said, finally. I was pinned under his dark gaze again, the hair on my arm standing on end, like a whisper of electricity had run over it. I took an unknowing step closer to him. Listen to your gut, Clancy said, turning his head back inside the office. The cluster of kids called out to him from where they were setting up lunch near the fire pit. And, ever the president's son, he smiled and waved at them real pretty. Listen to your gut. So why was I at odds with my head? I made a beeline for the wood dock I had discovered the afternoon before, needing to find some way to wash out the jitters racing through my heart. My mind felt tangled with the possibilities. Clancy Gray had just offered me everything I could have ever asked for, a way to avoid repeating what had happened to my parents and Sam, a way to be with Liam, to find Grams, to not live in constant fear of what I could do to them. So why hadn't my yes come tumbling out then? I ducked under the rope, tying off the path to the lake, and made it all the way down the trail before I realized anything was amiss. Crap, I said when I saw him. Oh no, 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 Chubb said. The goofy grin dropped off his face, and he stopped throwing bread crusts out to the ducks gathering in the water. This is my secret hideout. No rubies allowed. I found it first, I huffed, plopping down next to him. You most certainly did not. Try a week ago, while you were unpacking. He balked at that. Well, fine, but I got here first today. Aren't you supposed to be on garden duty? Got tired of hearing some girl coo about how smart the slip kid is for making them plant carrots. He leaned back. Aren't you on storage duty? I looked down where my hands were clenched into fists. When I didn't answer, Chubb set the bread bag aside and sat straight up. Hey, are you all right? He put a cool hand to my forehead. You look like you're going to be sick. Are you experiencing migraines or dizziness? That was an understatement, I croaked out with a laugh. Oh, he said as he pulled his hand away. That kind of head trouble. I lay back against the rough wood and threw my arms over my eyes, hoping the darkness might help dampen the headache. You said Jack taught you how to use your abilities? Pretty much, he said. That was the only way I was ever going to learn. If some other kid taught me. I mean, it just took a while to decide. Why? Because I thought if I didn't use them, they'd eventually go away, Chubb said quietly. I thought everything might go back to normal. There's scientific evidence that if we stop using parts of our brain, those sections eventually cease to function, after movement. He asked, Did Clancy offer to help you with your abilities? I nodded. I told him I'd think about it. What's to think about? Chubb smacked me on the stomach with his book. Didn't you say you didn't know how to control it? Well, yeah, but I'm afraid of how much I don't know. You need to be able to control it. Otherwise, it'll always control you, he said. It'll scare you and manipulate you until you go crazy, die, or they find a cure. And guess which one of those will probably happen first. The lunch bell sounded. 2 rings for second meal. Chubb stood and stretched, throwing the head of his bread out of the water. You really think they're going to find a cure? I asked. My dad used to say that anything was possible when you put your mind to it. His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. At the mention of his father, my stomach clenched. You still haven't had a chance to send a message. I've asked around, but there's only one computer in this entire godforsaken place, and only one person gets to use it. That's right, the silver laptop on Clancy's desk. Did you ask him if you could use it for a few minutes? Yeah, Chubb said, as the fire pit came into view. It looked like they were handing out sandwiches and apples. He said, No. Apparently, it's a security risk if someone other than him touches it. I shook my head. I'll ask tomorrow. Maybe I can convince him. Could you? Chubbs grabbed my arm, his face lightened considerably. Will you tell him that we have a very important letter to deliver, but we need to be able to look up Jack's father's new address? Tell him we'll do anything. No, tell him that I will personally lick every single pair of shoes he owns clean. How about I just tell him that it's the whole reason we came here in the first place, I said, and leave your tongue out of it. Chubbs waited until I had taken my sandwich from the table before pulling me away. I thought he might want to eat back at the cabin or even the dock, but we wandered until we found Liam and a few of the other guys on the security team. They were on a break from their rounds and had found themselves in a nice clearing of trees. It was just wide enough to square off into two teams for a quick game of hoverball, otherwise known as football with no hands. Chubbs and I found an old tree trunk to share, ignoring the small group of female spectators who had gathered to cheer on the teams. The small redhead with an explosion of freckles on his face levitated the old football to the start of the play. He ran alongside it, trying to keep both it and himself out of reach from the others. Liam at one point had that football an inch in front of him, but his hands were too slow and his footwork too bad to catch it when it was tossed to him. Keep your eye on the ball, Butterfingers, I called. Liam's head whipped around in our direction. Just as his gaze locked on mine, Mike, who had thrown the football at that point, mowed him over to get to the makeshift end zone. Chubbs and I cringed as Liam hit the ground and knocked his head against one of the old tree roots. Wow, I said. He wasn't kidding about sucking at sports. It'd be funny if it weren't so damn sad. The other boys were too busy laughing to keep the ball in the air. Liam stayed on the ground, his face flushed red, but his entire body shaking with laughter. He lifted his shirt to wipe the sweat off his face, giving me, along with every other girl present, a glimpse of skin. This time I was the one blushing. One of the guys didn't recognize jogged over to Liam to help him up. Patting him on the shoulder, they laughed together like they had known each other since preschool. But that was Liam for you. He joked about Zoo making friends at the drop of a hat, but he was actually the same way. Chubbs and I were perfectly content to sit by ourselves, watching, waiting, but not dipping our toes into the ocean. Maybe we had just gotten too used to being alone, and maybe that needed to change. Next morning, at exactly 9:21, I found myself standing outside of Clancy Gray's office, my hand raised, ready to knock. The only thing preventing me, besides the hula-hooping nerves in my gut, was the conversation happening on the other side of the door. Sure, we don't have the kind of numbers to do that. If I sent the amount of kids we'd need, there wouldn't be enough left here to maintain the watch. One girl's voice, soft but not sweet. Olivia, most likely, if they were talking about security. I get what you're saying, Liv, but it would be a waste to miss this opportunity, Clancy was saying. We're getting low on medical supplies, and Lita Corp has stopped running as many trucks through our area. Are you going on another one of your trips? She pressed. Isn't that when you usually pick up tips about shipments? Why do you ask? It's just, you haven't gone on one of those in almost a year, Olivia said. And you used to go all the time. I know we haven't been hurting for supplies, but maybe if you met with your source. No, Clancy said, with finality. I can't leave the camp anymore. It's not safe. Floorboards creaked. Did something come up on the PSF scanner? Came Hayes' gruff voice. They heard about the fruit stunt, obviously, Clancy said. It would have been hard to miss, considering you mutilated that driver. Why'd you have to say it like that? Because you should have just left him there, like I told you to. I appreciate you wanting to spread the symbol, but couldn't you have spray painted it on the truck? Are you worried that this'll be bad for our image? Olivia's voice dripped annoyance. Most people are going to have a hard enough time accepting that we're not monsters without reports of us maiming innocent people, Clancy said. So please spread the black, keep using the symbol, just try for some subtlety. Some what tea? Hayes asked. I'm sorry to cut our meeting short, but it seems like you both have things under control and I have someone waiting for me, Clancy said. I pulled myself away from the door. Liv, plan the hit. I'll worry about our numbers. I took a few steps back down the staircase, but it was pointless to pretend I hadn't been listening. The door opened, and the girl, Olivia, was the first to appear. She was tall and willowy, with legs for days and a tan that made her skin glow. I shook my head and turned to allow her and Hayes to squeeze by. Olivia was probably about my age, but she looked so much older. She looked like what I imagined 20 would feel like. When I looked up again, Clancy was leaning against the doorframe, grinning. He came. He waved me inside and guided me towards his desk. Sitting down in one of his chairs, I had a fleeting look on the other side of his room, where the curtain had been restrung. Clancy took his usual seat behind his desk, rocking the chair as he smiled. What made you change your mind? It's like you said, I mumbled. There are so few of us left, and I wanted to know how I can be around people I love and not be terrified of erasing myself. I read on the League's network that they weren't able to find any other oranges aside from you and Martin, Clancy said. Most of the Reds were killed, apparently. That puts us at the head of the pack. I guess, I said. Another thought occurred to me. How do you have access to the League's network? And the PSFs? I gestured around the room. Any of this? I have friends everywhere, Clancy said simply. His fingers drummed against his desk. My father leaves me alone because he wouldn't be able to stand the outrage if I exposed the fact that there were no rehabilitation program. Not for people like you and me. Me and you, I repeated. Clancy ran a hand through his hair. The first thing you need to understand, Ruby, is that we're not like the others. Me and you, everyone classified as an orange, we're different. Special. No, no, wait. I see you rolling your eyes, but you have to listen, okay? Because the second thing you have to understand is that everyone my father, the camp controllers, the scientists, the PSFs, the Children's League, they've been lying to you this entire time. We're special not because of what we are, but what they can't make us into. You're not making any sense, I said. He stood up and came around the desk to sit next to me. Would it help if I told you my story first? My eyes flickered up to meet his. If I do, you have to promise that it stays between us. Keeping secrets? That I could do. All right, he said. Give me your hand. I'm going to have to show you. When I had slipped into others' minds, there had always been a queasy feeling of sinking involved. More often than not, I found myself dropped in the middle of a swamp of dimly lit memories and unrestrained feelings with no map, no flashlight, and no easy way out. But there was nothing frightening about Clancy's mind. His memories were bright and crisp, full of blooming images and colors. It felt like he had taken my hand there too, was guiding me down a long hallway of windows into his past, only stopping long enough for me to glance inside each of them. The office was plain, stuffed with full of gunmetal gray filing cabinets, but little else. It could have been anywhere. The white paint was fresh enough that it bubbled on the wall, but I recognized the beginnings of a crescent-shaped machine in the back corner and the man staring down at me from across the card table serving as his desk. He was plump and balding at his hairline, which is a permanent fixture of the infirmary. I watched as his lips moved in a soundless explanation, my eyes drifting down to the crisp stack of papers on the front of his desk. My eyes. Oh, there at the top of it, the White House emblem. The words went into crystal focus. I felt my eyes jump over them, drinking them in with disbelief. Dear sirs, you may have my permission to run tests and experimental treatments on my son, Clancy James Beaumont Gray, provided these do not leave visible scars. The lights in the office grew brighter and brighter, bleaching out the memory. When they faded again, it was a much different room in the infirmary, this one all blue tiles and beeping monitors. No, I thought, trying to jerk free of the Velcro restraint that held me down against the metal table. I knew what this place was. The overhead lights were drawn down closer to my face by a gloved hand. At the corner of my vision, I saw the scientists and doctors in white scrubs, setting up their machines and computers around me. My jaw was clenched shut around the leather muzzle they had trapped to the back of my head. My hands kept my head still as wires and monitors were hooked up. I struggled again, twisting my neck far enough to catch the sight of a table lined with scalpels and small drills. I saw my reflection in the nearby observation windows, young, pale with terror, a mirror image of the portraits that would later hang across the camp. A harsh light from above grew and swelled, eating the scene. When it faded, the memory had changed again. My eyes fell first on the hand I was shaking, then slid up to an unfocused eye of the same scientist I had seen before. The men hovering around us all had that murky quality to their expressions. Blank smiles, blanker eyes. I squared my shoulders, a small thrill of victory working its way through my center as I moved through the main gate to the waiting car. Another light, this time from a camera's flash. When the shock of it faded, I looked up into the face of an older, weathered version of my own. The photographer flipped the monitor around for us to see the portrait. I was no longer seeing myself as a boy, but a young man, 15, maybe even 16. As the photographer set up his equipment again, this time across the room, I put a hand on the president's back, guiding him around the couches, to the great dark wood desk. The rose bushes were scratching intently at the windows, but directed his focus on the sheet of white paper resting there in front of him, and compelled him to pick it up pick up the paper and pen. When he finished signing, he turned to me with an unfocused gaze and a numb, unknowing smile. Weeks must have passed, months, maybe even years. I felt exhaustion creep through me, wrapping itself like a heavy chain around my center. It was dark now. I couldn't place the time of night, though I saw that it was a hotel room and not a particularly good one. I was staring at the ceiling, half buried under the covers, when a figure seemed to peel itself out from the shadows of the closet. It was fast, almost too much for me to keep up with. A man in a black mask, the metallic gleam of his gun. I threw my covers off of me and kicked my legs out, sending the attacker stumbling back. The shot went out from his gun with a combustion of light and little sound. The smell of it scorched my nostrils. I slipped onto my back. One of the man's forearms braced against my neck, crushing the fragile rings of cartilage. My hands lashed out, hitting the rough carpet, the nightstand, and finally his face. Not even the terror pulsing through every inch of me kept from crashing into his mind. Stop! I felt my lips form the word, but I couldn't hear myself. Stop! The man did, and with a blank look of someone whose skull had just been cracked open and exposed to freezing air, he sat back, his gun on the floor at his side. I was coughing and hacking, trying to bring air into my own lungs, but I grabbed the gun and stuffed it into the waistband of my pajamas. I stopped long enough to grab my winter coat from where it had been thrown across the room's desk chair, and then I was outside in the hallway, staring at the place where a man should have been posted outside my door and guarding me. And I knew what was going on. I knew what would happen to me if someone were to find me alive in the morning. I was running down the hotel stairs, through the kitchens, out past the dumpsters, and through the parking lot. Running, my chest on fire, hearing the sounds of voices shouting after me. Boots pounding on the pavement, running for the trees, the darkness. Ruby! Ruby! I came back to myself in Clancy's office, bit by bit, with a headache severe enough that I had to put my face between my legs to avoid throwing up all over it. They tried to kill you, I said, when I finally found my voice. Who? Who do you think? Clancy's voice was dry. That man was one of the Secret Service agents who were supposed to be guarding me. But that doesn't make any sense, I pressed, the back of my hand to my forehead, squeezing my eyes shut against the dizziness. If they were carting you around and using you to explain the rehab program, then why? Because they figured out that I hadn't rehabbed at all, he said. My father, I mean. The only reason they let me on a Thurman is because I made them think I had been cured. But I got too ambitious. I tried to play my father by influencing him, and I got caught. Clancy trailed off for a moment. He was worried that the truth about the camps would get out, I'm sure. But he couldn't just take me out of the public eye, not when he'd been the one to thrust me into it. No, I think in his mind it was easier to just get rid of me altogether before I could cause trouble. I only imagine what kind of spin he'd put on my murder to get back in the sympathetic graces of his fellow Americans. I stared at him for a long while, speechless. How did you survive that life? I wanted to ask. How are you? And how are you you, and not the monster they could have turned you into? After I got out that night, I met Hayes, and then Olivia, and then others. We found this place and went to work, and all the while my father couldn't put a bounty out on me, not without exposing the truth about me and how his rehab program had failed. He had to make up some lie about me attending college to get the press off his back. Clancy smiled then. So you see, I did win in the end. He rose from his chair, reaching out a hand. I took it without being conscious of it. Feeling the calm wash over me as he squeezed my fingers, my head was silent. I felt myself lean forward. When I heard your story, I knew I had to meet you. I had to make sure you knew the truth about what was going on, so you wouldn't be caught in the darkness the way that I was. The truth? I looked up, startled. What do you mean? Clancy didn't release my hand. He only sat at the edge of his desk in front of me. The woman who broke you out of Thurmond, the League agent, what did she tell you about the white noise they used that day? That the camp controllers had embedded a frequency in it that only oranges, reds, and yellows could detect, I said. I must have known that about I know he must have known about that. They used the same method to broadcast the location of camp. That they were in danger to pick out any of the dangerous ones that were still hiding out. Clancy released my hand and reached back to turn his laptop so it faced us. On the screen was a snapshot of my face on the morning they had brought me into camp. But the text beside it wasn't my history. Read the second paragraph aloud. I looked up at him, confused, but did as I was asked. Camp Controller Harris discovered the discrepancy in the comm control at 5:23 the following morning. After noticing an underlying frequency that had been added without his consent, I paused, licking my dry lips. Upon further investigation of the recording devices in the mess hall, he came to the conclusion that the outbreak of violence that that resulted in the use of comm control at approximately 11:42 was directly provoked by undercover operatives by the terrorist group the Children's League. He believes these same operatives planted the identification frequency in the comm control. PSI subjects 3285 and 5312, who were taken from camp boundaries at approximately 3:34 by a Children's League operative, are now believed to have been mistakenly identified as green upon their initial classification. Keep going, Clancy said when my voice trailed off. Subjects 3285 and 5312 are believed to be highly dangerous. Orders have been issued for their immediate recapture and reprocessing. Reprocessing? My eyes flew up again. But the way this was written, they didn't know. They didn't. Are you trying to tell me that they had no idea I was an orange until after I got out? Clancy nodded. It sounds that way. Then it wasn't in any danger after all? They wouldn't have killed me? Oh, you were definitely in danger, he said. They had all the pieces. It just took one curious mind to put it all together. But if you're asking whether or not you would have been caught if the League hadn't planted the frequency, then the answer to that is no, probably not. Then why did they do it? I demanded. It seemed like a huge risk to take to only get a few kids. A few extremely valuable, rare kids, he corrected. The kids that would have been killed otherwise. Seeing my expression, he added, not unkindly, you didn't really think they'd let any of kids like us live, did you? Not oranges. Yellows, yes, because their threat can be contained, but not oranges. I pass a hand over my face. What about the reds then? Were they killed too? No, Clancy said. His voice became quiet and hesitant. They had a much worse fate. I waited for him to continue, hands twisting in my lap. The President's classified program. Clancy crossed his arms over his chest, leaning back. Project Jamboree. Dear old Dad's been training himself a special army using all the reds they took from camps. You can see why, he cleared his throat. You can see why the leagues would be interested in finding any particularly dangerous kids for their own. I shook my head, dropping my face into my hands. Of all of the scenarios I had imagined, of all the things I thought had happened to those kids, this was too insane for me to have ever dreamed up. How could they force them into this? I asked, my own voice sounding hollow to my own ears. Why did they agree? What other choice do they have? Clancy asked. They were made to think that if they didn't cooperate, something would happen to their families. They underwent a special conditioning program to make them think that they were needed and cared for absolutely. Before my father and his advisors figured out that I was influencing them, I was able to supervise enough of the program to ensure that they would be cared for. Better than they had been if they were in camps, at least. He shook his head. Don't be afraid for them. They'll get out under my father's control one day. And they're not dead, I thought. There's that. Ruby. I looked up, feeling cold down to my guts. Let me show you what I know, he whispered, his other hand rising to brush the hair off my cheek. The clenched mass of nerves in my stomach eased at the touch, and I felt what few suspicions I had left about him unwinding. We were the same in ways that mattered. He wanted to help me, even though I had nothing to offer him in return. No one will be able to hurt you or change you if you can fight them off, he said softly. It wasn't desperation that drove me forward. It wasn't even self-pity. It was pure, distilled strand of hatred weaving its way through my core. The thought of the slip kid The thought the slip kid would be able to help me reclaim my old life, but now I knew that wasn't enough. I needed him to help me protect my future. When I spoke, my words burned the air between us. Teach me.